wish I knew how to.
Listen, guys, it's fruit back there. Please get some, or they'll never give it to us again. It's fruit back there. Good afternoon. Welcome to the May 12th, 2022 meeting of the City County Planning Board. My name is Chris Leak, and I am the chair of the Planning Board. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and will be rebroadcast at 10 a.m. Friday morning and again at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For all public hearings today, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There is no rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless a planning board member asks them a question. For general use district zoning requests, the planning board must consider the full range of uses allowed in the zoning district being requested. The petitioner may not refer to a specific use for the property. For special use district zoning request, however, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. Items under Section B of the agenda will require final action by the appropriate elected body, either the City Council or County Commissioners. As such, votes taken by the Planning Board concerning these items are recommendations that will be considered by the elected bodies during their review of the requests. Before addressing the Planning Board today, if you're speaking, we will need your name, address, and zip code for the record. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the April 14th and April 20th meetings. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
A motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Those in favor, normal sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposes? That's unanimous. Thank you. Just for protocol, I think we have Councilmember John Larson and Councilmember Annette Scipio in the audience. Is there anyone else that I'm missing from the council? All right, thank you for being in attendance today. All right, I'm going to now call on Mr. Desmond Corley to review the consent agenda.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to begin by just highlighting a few items that are going to be continued to later meetings. Items B1 and E3 on the agenda will be continued to the board's meeting on June 9th. And item E2 will be continued to the board's meeting on July 14th. So we will not be hearing any presentations on those cases today. Just a reminder, everything that is under Section B of the agenda will require 2 motions and 2 votes by the board. The first is for consistency and the second one is for the board's recommendation. So with that, I will start with item B2, which is case W3520. This was continued from last month's meeting. It's a request to rezone 7 acres from GB to LIL. The property is at the northern terminus of Back 40 Drive on the west side of US 52. The petitioner is requesting rezoning to allow for some limited industrial uses that are not also allowed in the general business district. Their proposed conditions include extensive buffering along the property boundaries shared with residential neighbors and paving the access drive to avoid excess dust traveling to adjacent properties and US 52. This is consistent with the area plan, and staff recommends approval of the request.
No one is signed in opposition. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is
Mr.
the motion of
Chairman,
the board?
this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Opposes? None. That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3520.
A motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? That is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on consent is B3, which is case W 3524. This is a request to rezone 6 acres from RS20 to RS9. The property is on the east side of Bethania-Tobacconville Road, south of Kilby Road. This is a general use rezoning, so the board has to consider all uses allowed in RS9. The subject property is in Growth Management Area 3, which is suburban neighborhoods. It has good access to public utilities. The area plan recommendation would accommodate a residential density up to 8 dwellings per acre. RS9 accommodates a little more than 4. So this is consistent with the area plan. Staff recommends approval of this request.
No one is signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the motion?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3524.
Second.
Motion and second. Any
Yeah.
discussion?
Mr. Corley, are all these houses going to exit onto the curve? This area here, do they have any other plan?
We don't have
You don't
any
have a site.
plans in right now.
Okay.
There's a motion and second on the floor. Any further discussion? Those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
Thank you. The next item on consent is B4, which is case W 3525. This is on the north side of Kester Mill Road, west of Tatton Park Drive. Excuse me, it's about an acre requesting to rezone from RS9 to LIL. This would be an extension of zoning approved with W 3422 to the west. So you can see the LIL district immediately adjacent to this. This would basically be an extension of that. Here are the conditions proposed with this request, which are the same as the conditions that were approved with W 3422. If approved, these conditions would supersede the conditions for the property to the west, such that the 20-foot street yard and berm will be installed along the entire frontage of Kester Mill Road, and the buffer yard will be installed at the eastern boundary of this district rather than the one to the west. This is consistent with the area plan, and staff recommends approval.
No one is signed up in opposition. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the motion of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign.
No.
We have one opposed. Mr. Bryan, did you?
Said no. Yep.
Right, one opposed, one opposition.
And Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3525.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Those-
I'm sorry. I signed up as proposition, but can I speak?
We've already closed the public hearing. If you signed up as a proponent, it's fine because it's going through as a motion now. All right, thank you. Previous motion and second on the floor. All those in favor, sign of aye.
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 Opposed, the same sign. All right, that is unanimous.
Thank you. The next item on consent is B5, which is case W 3526. This is a request to rezone .31 acre from NBS to NBL. Properties on the north side of Old Greensboro Road, west of Waterworks Road. The zoning is already in place to allow some commercial uses on this property. This would allow some flexibility in use and layout while maintaining those protections from disruptive uses. All supplemental district requirements for the neighborhood business district would be met whenever a change of use was proposed that required site modifications. This is consistent with the area plan and staff recommends approval.
No one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the motion?
Yep. Mr. Corley, what are the protections that have been put into place on this?
So the NB district has built-in protections for required buffering from parking areas. The parking has to be located to the side or the rear. Certain uses are not allowed in the neighborhood business district, and some uses that are allowed in the neighborhood business district are further restricted not to allow things that are incompatible, like convenience store would not allow fuel pumps, and those sorts of things.
Okay, thank you.
What is the motion of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
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 Opposers, same sign. That is unanimous.
And, Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3526.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
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 Opposers? That is unanimous.
Thank you. The next item on consent is B8. It's case W3530. This is a request to rezone .19 acre from LO to PBL. This property is on the west side of South Spruce Street, north of Salem Parkway. This request would bring the allowable uses on the property more in line with what the area plan recommends for the high-activity areas adjacent to downtown. The area plan recommends mixed use for this property. So it's consistent with the area plan, and staff recommends approval of this request.
No one has signed up in opposition. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the motion of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3530.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposes? That is unanimous as well.
Thank you. So the following items on the agenda or on the consent agenda do not require public hearings, so we only need one motion for each of them. The next one is C1. This is case W3528. It is a special use permit request for a parking reduction exception in GMA 2 on the southwest side of Brookstown Avenue, southeast of Burke Street. So we saw a few of these in the past couple of years in the West End area where people were proposing to open restaurants and didn't have enough existing parking to meet the requirement. Here is the proposed site plan. This is an existing vacant commercial building being proposed for use as a restaurant, and it's the restaurant use that's requiring the special use permit. The board's role here is to certify that the site plan meets all UDO requirements to the extent possible. So the one that they cannot meet is parking, and that's why they're requesting this special use permit. Staff recommends, or staff says that the site plan meets UDO requirements, so we recommend that this move on to the city council.
And, Mr. Chairman, I move approval. Do you need a definitive statement about compliance in the motion?
I think what we've said in the past is since you're just doing a site plan completeness check or site plan compliance check, except for the item that they're asking for the waiver from, that we do not need a plan consistency statement.
Okay.
I have a motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Yes.
I have a question for Mr. Corley.
Can you speak in the mic a little bit?
How much of the parking are they unable to meet? Is it all of the parking or just a portion of the parking?
It's a portion of the parking. The building is long. I want to say it's around 3,000 square feet or a little more than 3,000 square feet. Restaurants require one space per 100 square feet. They only have 4 existing spaces. they're able to get a credit, a 30% reduction for being zone PB. There's a reduction for being near sidewalks, and there's a reduction for being near transit. None of those reductions are going to get them down to 30. I'm sorry. None of those reductions are going to get them down to 4. So they are requesting basically permission to be able to use their existing parking and any on-street parking that's available to meet the parking requirement.
Okay, thank you.
There's a previous motion, a second on the floor. All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That is unanimous.
The next item on consent is D1. This is a preliminary subdivision on almost 28 and a half acres in the Innovation Quarter. This is a proposal for the southern portion of Innovation Quarter to allow the infrastructure for future development. You can see on the site plan that there are 9 lots here and the addition of 2 public streets. There is a condition or a modification to the conditions that were in the agenda book, so I just want to read that in for you all. For the record, the petitioner is agreeable to this condition. This would replace, or this would slot in above the current condition that appears last under prior to the signing of final plats in the agenda. The developer shall record an agreement with the city of Winston-Salem, assuming all responsibility for the installation, ownership, and maintenance of streetscape improvements located behind the curb of Vision Street and Collaboration Street, including streetlights, landscaping, furnishing, sidewalks, and crosswalks. An encroachment agreement shall be required where such improvements are installed within existing rights-of-way. This site plan meets UDO requirements, and so staff recommends approval.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. That is unanimous.
And the last item on consent is item E1. This is a revision to a planning board review for a PRD that you all saw in January.
Mr. Corley, may I interrupt, please?
Yes.
I need to recuse myself.
All right, without objection, that's fine.
This is a development that you all saw in January by the name of Alder Creek. It's on 67.29 acres. So the plan that you all approved in January is on the left, and the proposed plan is on the right. This request would make some minor modifications to the PRD that was approved in January, mainly concerning lot layout and street connectivity in the southern portion of the site. They were able to demonstrate to engineering staff that the connection that you'll see on the left side here is not feasible, so they've proposed to cul-de-sac in that area. The site plan still meets UDO requirements, so staff recommends approval of this request.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Motion by Mr. Grubbs, second by Mr. Stillman. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Thank you, that is unanimous.
All right, that is all I have for you on the consent agenda. I believe we have people signed up, or I'm sorry, I believe we will have a public hearing for item B6, which is case W3527. Amy McBride is going to speak to you all about Flower Box Tea Room.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, before you is case W3527. Petitioners are Michael and Ludmila Ranieri. Site is 0.52 acres at the north side of Salisbury Ridge Road, across from Nelson Street, and the request is special use rezoning from RS7 to NBS. This is Legacy before you. Subject site is within GMA2 and located between 2 activity centers. On the location map, the subject site is shown in yellow. It does have frontage along 2 public roads, Salisbury Ridge Road and West Acadia Avenue. The surrounding areas are zoned RS9 and RS7. So this is the aerial image, and you can see the site is located within an established residential area. So this is the subject property. This is looking north from Salisbury Ridge Road. And this is the subject property looking southwest from Acadia Avenue. So this is the subject property looking directly west. And this is the existing driveway, which is connecting Acadia Avenue to Salisbury Ridge Road. The proposed site plan is utilizing the connection to both streets. To the left side of the picture, just where the car is, and to the left side, they will be proposing an asphalt parking lot with 16 spaces with entrances from both Salisbury Ridge and from Acadia. And this is the view north to Acadia Avenue from the subject property. This is the view south along the rear of the structure. A minimum 15-foot type 2 landscape buffer is required. As an alternative compliance, the petitioners are proposing a 6-foot tall opaque fence along the length of the structure. And this is the South Central Area Plan. You can see the subject property is within the yellow shaded single-family residential use. The property is located within 2 activity centers, Parkway, which is less than a quarter mile to the southeast, and Washington Park, which is a quarter mile to the east. Both activity centers are existing commercial uses with underutilized space available. And this is the proposed site plan. You can see highlighted in green the portion of the existing structure which will be for the commercial use. The portion in blue is where the petitioners are planning to live. Also, you can see that there is a requirement for buffers along the east and the west. Along the east side, they do have room to have a 15-foot wide planted landscape buffer. To the east. To the west, where the house is, they don't have that room just because of the location of the house. So that's where the proposed opaque fence will be. But then to the north and the south, where they do have room, they're proposing that 15-foot wide buffer. And you can also see the proposed parking lot with the connections both to Acadia and to Salisbury. And in summary, the area plan recommends single-family residential use of the property. The request is not consistent with the purpose statement of the NB district and could encourage commercial encroachment into the residential areas along this corridor. The site is bookended by activity centers, which are more appropriate for this intensity of use. And the request would not provide a neighborhood service at a residential scale and could route commercial traffic onto a local residential street. And recommendation is denial. The site plan does meet UDO requirements. And if there are any questions from the board, I'll be happy to answer that.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Yeah, just a comment. When there's an alternative compliance requirement about it meeting the UDO requirements, would an approval be approving that alternative compliance, or does that go through another process?
Yes. So if the board would, I think I turned myself off. If the board moved this forward with an approval, then the alternative compliance would be approved or would be recommended for approval at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any additional questions? All right, thank you. All right, we will have a public hearing on this item, seeing that we have proponents and opponents. Again, each side will have a total of 12 minutes, and there will be no rebuttal period. So looking at the proponents first, we have Steve Causey, I think it's Millie Renari, Mike Renari, and Kevin Owen in that order. If you state your name and address and zip code for the record, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Steve Causey, Allied Design, 4720 Kester Mill Road, Winston-Salem, 27103. We worked with the petitioners to prepare the site plan before you today. Also here are Mike and Millie Ranieri. They'll follow me shortly and speak a little bit more about their intended use of the property, and their architect, Kevin Owens, also here today. Again, we appreciate staff working with us through the site plan process. As Amy stated, this is a renovation of an existing structure. In that regard, we certainly don't feel it proposes significant impacts to the neighborhood. The buffers, we feel like, will help mitigate those impacts, and certainly be more trees at the end of the day than there are out there on site today. Staff has been very clear from the start. They don't support the request. We think we understand why, but Mike and Mila will be up here behind me and maybe help understand why they do feel like it would serve the neighborhood. So I'll be here to answer any questions on the site plan. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
My name's Mike Ranieri. I live at 697 Salisbury Ridge Road, 27127. Mr. Chairman and board members, thank you for allowing me to speak today on zoning docket W3527. I've read the review comments and recommendations on our zoning request, and I have the following to offer. I used to live in Greensboro and worked in Winston-Salem at CGMW on Brookstown Avenue for 12 years. During that time, my coworkers and I went out for lunch and tried many local eating spots. Sometimes we walked across to Opie's or Sweet Potatoes on Trade. Sometimes we drive out to Pulliam's or Bell Brothers near the airport. Sometimes we drove to the Acadia Grill on Acadia or Ted's Kickin' Chicken on Main. Were it not for those neighborhood restaurants, I never would have known Winston-Salem. Other than Business 40 exit to Main Street, left on First Street, left on Liberty, right on Brookstown. That would be my knowledge of Winston. I understand that there's a plan, and we all need plans to help us keep track of our progress. But I think that sometimes we get too close, and we don't recognize that maybe parts of our plan don't apply anymore. Acadia is no more just a neighborhood street than Broad Street or Liberty Street. It's not a quiet street like Cascade with its colonial and Victorian homes. It's not a comfortable vintage with its bungalows. It has become a pass-through corridor between Silas Creek Parkway and Points East. This very report says the traffic analysis shows 6,400 cars per day drive up and down Salisbury Ridge Road. Acadia begins its life with limited industrial on one side and campus special use on the other. As it heads across Main Street, it becomes limited business and then becomes RM12. Acadia continues on past Family Dollar on the right, about a block and a half of pedestrian business. In that block and a half are a general contractor with a construction vehicle yard, 3 out of the 4 automotive repair shops on Acadia. Then Acadia moves across Holyrood and becomes RS9. It's near this point that Acadia continues straight for another block and ends at Dinmont. Meanwhile, a block earlier, Salisbury Ridge has begun. It heads off to the left, heads up and over Peters Creek Parkway, headed for Silas Creek Parkway, with highway business on both sides. Our house is on Salisbury Ridge. We chose it because there's a 1,400 square foot house with a 40 by 40 open room that was added onto the house after its beginning. The lot is split in half by a driveway that passes between Salisbury Ridge and Acadia. In our minds, that was the perfect spot for a tea room. It is in a wonderful neighborhood. It's a natural spot for parking, and there's plenty of room for us and for guests. A tea room is labeled a restaurant, though it's not. A tea room is compared to a coffee shop, though it's not. A tea room is a place where people come and sit and talk with each other for 1.5 to 2 hours while sipping tea and eating a finger sandwich or a scone. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and board members, thank you for allowing me to speak today on the rezoning of my home at 697 Salisbury Ridge Road, Winston-Salem, 27127. My name is Mila Ranieri, and I'm the owner of the Flower Box Tea Room. 10 years ago, the laboratory that I worked for sent me for 3 months to Wetherby, England. While I was there, I spent my free time sightseeing and visiting a variety of tea rooms. The English tea service made a lasting impression on me, which I wanted to share with other people back home. A tea room is not a fast food restaurant. It is not a private club. A tea room is just a quiet place where people come to disconnect from their phones and laptops and spend a couple of hours having conversation with their friend over a pot of tea and some sweets and savories. North Carolina is a part of the sweet tea belt, so I knew serving hot tea would seem out of place until people tried it. A very nice space with a large oven came available in Winston-Salem, so I quit my job and started the Flower Box LLC. I began tasting recipes for breads and pies and cookies and scones. Soon I opened the tea room for business. I understand from the Small Business Association that 50% of new businesses fail within the first year. The second year, 50% of those remaining businesses fail. And so until 5th year. They say if you make it that far, you know your business has made it. In the 5th year of my business, constructions on Business 40 began. It closed most of the routes to my tea room. The Flower Box tea room survived. In the 6th year of my business, COVID shut down all inside dining. Again, the Flower Box tea room survived. The only thing that stopped my business was the landlord selling the building. I'm looking for performance, and I believe I have found it on Salisbury Ridge Road. Please help me to rezone so that I can reopen my tea room. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kevin Owen with Owen Architecture, 228 Knollwood Street, Winston-Salem, 27104. I'm the architect doing the renovation of this project. Believe wholeheartedly that we have updated a building that is deteriorating and made it a part of the neighborhood. Are there any questions about the construction? All right, thank you.
Thank you. How much time is left? 4.5.
About 4.5 minutes.
Thank you. 4.5 minutes left. Would anyone else like to speak in support? If you would state your name, address, and zip code for the record, please.
My name is Amanda Burcham. I live at 801 Salisbury Ridge Road, Winston-Salem, 27127. I live 4 doors down from the Ranneries and came to the neighborhood meeting that they had to discuss the rezoning. I was one of 2 people in the neighborhood who came to find out what was going to happen and what they were proposing. And I will say I have been nothing but excited about the prospect of the Flower Box since then. I think that it could be a place, especially in the wake of COVID, that allows neighbors to gather together in a safe, charming, and lovely place. I will admit that I do not know my neighbors very well, and that is something that has hurt my heart for years. I think this could provide something where all of us who are within walking distance could really have an opportunity and an easy place to go to sit and get to know and enjoy one another. And I know that I would love to frequent the Flower Box, especially if it were just 5 doors down. My waistline might not appreciate it. But, and speaking to the traffic, Salisbury Ridge is a very busy street. Any additional busyness that would come by filling a 16-spot parking lot, I think would be mitigated by the value that the Flower Box would add to our neighborhood and to our culture and to bringing neighbors together again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
About 3 minutes.
Would anyone else like to speak in support? All right, seeing no one, we will now go to the opposition. Cornelia Barr, Elizabeth Nannery, and Jim, I can't read the last name, I'm sorry.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Cornelia Barr. I live at 355 Park Boulevard, 27127. I've been a resident of Washington Park since 1999, and I represent the Washington Park Neighborhood Association, which opposes the rezoning of this property. Since 1977, the Neighborhood Association has worked to improve the quality of life in the neighborhood by increasing owner occupancy, addressing safety concerns, achieving designation of the historic area as a National Historic District, and instilling a sense of community and pride in our neighborhood. We define the Washington Park neighborhood as extending from the park itself to the north to Silas Creek Parkway, and from Buchanan Street to South Main Street, an area beyond the historic district that includes over 800 households. Changing this property from residential to neighborhood business flies in the face of everything the Neighborhood Association has worked to build. It would be a terrible precedent. I have enjoyed the Flower Box as a locally owned tea room and want it to thrive, just not in this location. Our big concern is that commercial rezoning is permanent. If the restaurant were to fail, another business could come in with a convenience store, a nail salon, or one of the many other uses allowed with neighborhood business. This could lead to neighbors moving away, surrounding properties being zoned commercial, and an overall negative impact. We're not opposed to supporting businesses in Washington Park at all. In 2006, we were awarded a RUCA grant for the commercial district on Acadia Avenue. RUCA supported improvements at several locally owned businesses, including Washington Park, Craft Cleaners, Swaim's, and the Washington Park Barbershop. And this growth has had an impact on more recent businesses such as Slappy's Chicken, J&J. So we invest, our neighborhood association invests time and energy in our community, and we support the city's plans for growth. But we oppose expanding commercial development beyond the existing business districts. And just in closing, the Winston-Salem Neighborhood Alliance mailed you a statement supporting of our opposition. It came out in the afternoon. I don't know if everyone has read it. The Winston-Salem Neighborhood Alliance would like to express its support for a recommendation of denial in case W3527 on Salisbury Ridge Road from RS7 to NBS. WSNA agrees with the planning staff's assessment that commercial zoning in this all-residential area is inconsistent with the area plan. It continues to support the efforts of Washington Park to maintain its integrity and cohesiveness, and we believe that commercial zoning in this location could undermine that integrity by leading to other similar requests that are incompatible with the residential character of the neighborhood, of the area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Barr.
Mr. Chairman, while the next speaker is coming up, there's about 8 minutes and 50 seconds left, but I will just let you know that I know that we did send the email out from the Winston-Salem Neighborhood Alliance, but in case you didn't have a chance to see it, that we do have a copy at your place as well.
Right.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Elizabeth Nannery. I live at 209 Gloria Avenue, Winston-Salem 27127. I have to say that I've been in Washington Park 2 years. I lived there for 2 years, but I've been in the neighborhood because my mom's been in the neighborhood for almost 40 years. And I've watched the neighborhood grow over that time. It has had good periods and bad periods. And we actually have all talked about having a nice place to go and gather, like the tea room. So it's, again, not that we're opposed to having the tea room. We think it'd be a wonderful addition, just not in that location. I totally agree with what Cornelia was saying as far as changing anything. If you rezone it, it becomes permanent, and now there is all kinds of opportunities for other businesses to come in and change the character that we have strived so hard to keep in Washington Park. What we'd really like to propose is to work with the Flower Box to try to make one of the other distressed buildings in the area that are in that area, in that commercial area already on Acadia, maybe work for the Flower Box. And I mean, as someone who's in the neighborhood, and I do love hot tea, so again, we would really like to work with them to try to find another area that would be suitable, because we do think it would be a great addition. So, thank you.
Thank you. How much time do we have left?
A little over 7 minutes.
All right.
Good afternoon. My name is James Houlihan, and I live at 100 West Banner Avenue, Winston-Salem 27127. I guess I'm the oldster here. I'm a resident of the neighborhood since 1983, and have lived in my current home, which was built to the plans of Willard Northrop, for over 30 years. In being a past president for the Washington Park Neighborhood Association, I've seen a lot of changes happen and come and go, and I can only echo what has been said so far. As my personal opinion is that I would more than welcome having the tea house and other very nice businesses such as that be in our neighborhood. Unfortunately, I have to agree that I don't think the placement is appropriate. And I certainly hope that we can find some kind of compromise that will allow this business to be in an appropriate area in Washington Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Houlihan. Thank you. How much time?
A little over 6 minutes.
All right. Would anyone else like to speak in opposition? There's 6 minutes left. All right, seeing no one, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed at this time. What is the pleasure of the board? Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to, that this proposal is not consistent with the UDO. Not sure exactly how to make the motion. Inconsistent with a comprehensive plan.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Dunnigan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Farabee. Any discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
And Mr. Chairman, I would further move that the planning board recommend denial of W 3527.
We have a motion by Ms. Dunnigan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lamb. Any further discussion?
Is it all right to offer just a thought at this time, Mr. Chairman?
We offer discussion, yes, sir.
I would like to say I absolutely positively love neighborhoods and urban neighborhoods, both in the United States and Europe, and I think the chance to walk 5 doors down to a tea room would be splendid. But we don't have a zoning classification for tea rooms. The zoning being requested is for a restaurant, and that could go any number of directions anytime in the future. And without something more specialized by category than just restaurant, it's hard for me to support this when I think about the long-term benefit for Washington Park.
Thank you.
Can I ask staff a question? Is there any way that they could come for a different zoning designation?
Yeah.
Like a PUD to me would satisfy, but then we get into spot zoning, so I don't.
Yeah, there wouldn't be any other zoning classification. I mean, quite honestly, NB is one of the least intense zoning classifications. Even if there was a less intense zoning classification, you would still have the issue with what the area plan recommends and the intent behind the area plan being to try to concentrate the commercial development at the activity centers on either end of this stretch of road. One of the things we've really done over the last 10 to 12 years is try to streamline the UDO and remove extraneous uses. I don't know that a solution would be to come up with a use of coffee or tea room. I mean, that perhaps could be something that could be considered, but we don't have that as a tool right now. There certainly isn't another zoning district that would fit, and even if we did come up with the use, we would still have the issue of the incompatibility with the comp plan.
Are there any conditions that could be designed that would put enough limitations on it?
You could strike all the permitted uses.
Well, and they have limited their uses to single-family residential and restaurant without drive-through. There's just not really any other way. The NAICS doesn't give a lot of subcategories for restaurants and other types of eating establishments, so it would be hard to limit it to a specific NAICS or SIC code, Standard Industrial Classification, North American Industrial Classification System. Those are wonky planning terms, but essentially there are books and guidance that's put out, and sometimes we do have conditions of approval that specifically say, and actually you've already approved one earlier today with that with the case on Spruce Street that said, basically the retail store is further limited to clothing stores and specialty retail stores. But there's not really any way to further limit it through some other subcategory of restaurant without drive-through. Again, I will echo that, again, I think this has been a great establishment. It would be great to see this reestablished somewhere within the city, again, from a planning perspective, under the parameters that we are given with the area plan recommendation and the uses that we have in the UDO. There's just not really any way to kind of shoehorn this in there.
So when we did something like Campus Gas before, we put hours of operation limitations, but that already had an historical business use. It wasn't a new use.
Right. Of course, this isn't that situation, and that this is, believe it or not, looking at the structure, it's my understanding from speaking to staff that the addition on the rear was put on there intentionally for the former property owner to try to entice his kids to come home and live, and I don't think they ever did. So that was a large addition that was put on the house. So it's kind of out. It doesn't look like residential in nature, but it was truly added as a residential use. But again, getting back to the Campus Gas example, this property doesn't kind of fit that because it doesn't have the history of non-residential use. The one thing that we run into any time we have hours of operation limitations, it's an enforcement issue because we're not working generally whenever those hours of operation limitations are. So if someone were to complain, then we have to catch them in the act, which means we have to try to catch them open times when they're not supposed to be. So generally speaking, we try to avoid those.
And I'll just add one of the concerns that I had. I like the idea of neighborhood business. Am I heard? Am I heard?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. I do like the idea of neighborhood business. One of the concerns with this particular location is that it creates the neighbor's house to be like an island on the pizza slice there, and so it goes beyond just having a walkable neighborhood business. I just don't think it's particularly fair to the neighbor to then be on a residential island by themselves with streets behind them and in front of them. I just think that's one concern that does have to be considered.
And if I can make a comment, just to support the motion that I made, I echo a lot of what other people have said. I think the Tea House is a wonderful establishment, and I would visit it myself. But the issue really I see is, as outlined by the staff, was the precedent for creating potential more commercial along that strip of Salisbury Ridge bordering the neighborhood. I think the petitioner said that Salisbury Ridge was a pass-through corridor. I don't think it is. I think it's a neighborhood that we don't want to become strip development between two existing commercial areas. And in order to prevent that, we have to kind of hold the line on rezonings like this, because this would be the first domino that could possibly create that effect. And that's my big concern. And for that reason, I think it's not a good idea for this area.
Sounds like the tea room is a great idea, and hopefully some collaboration can be done between the neighbors and the opportunity. So we do have a motion and second. All those in favor, sign of aye.
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 Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Board, the next case that we'll hear is case B7, W3529, and Tiffany White on our staff will give that presentation.
Good evening, Chairman Leake and board members. I'm here to present W3529, which is a request from Hubbard Realty of Winston-Salem, LLC. The site is 88.08 acres on the south side of Somerset Drive, north and east of Jonestown Road and west of Stratford Road. The request is a special use rezoning from RS9 to RM5S. Here is the legacy map, which shows that the site is located in GMA3 suburban neighborhoods. The location map shows the 3 parcels that make up the site. It also shows the Little Creek and its floodway and flood zone to the western portion of the sites. In addition, it shows some of the smaller creeks that move along the southern portion of the site. This is the aerial image, which again shows the 3 parcels that make up this site, and the fact that currently they are wooded. This is an image of Somerset Drive looking west. The property is the wooded area to the left. The proposed entrance to this development is just beyond that rezoning notice sign on the left. This is looking the other way on Somerset Drive, looking east. The property is to the right in this image, and again, the proposed entrance location is here in the foreground at the right. This is Lockwood Drive, looking south. This is the other frontage that this interior site has, and the arrow identifies the approximate location of the entrance into the development off of Lockwood. This is the area plan map. The Southwest Suburban Area Plan Update recommends single-family residential, which is defined as having 0 to 8 dwelling units per acre. Here is the proposed site plan. This proposed site plan shows 115 single-family homes surrounding 101 townhomes that are centrally located to the development itself. The proposed density of this RM5S request is comparable to the underlying zoning density, and the proposed density of this site plan is 2.45 dwelling units per acre. The site plan shows the entrances off Somerset Drive and Lockwood Drive, and shows the improvements to Somerset Drive, including a right-hand slip lane and a left turn stacking lane. There is a 15-foot type 2 buffer yard along Somerset Drive that was not required for this rezoning, but was volunteered to help screen the development along Somerset Drive and along that frontage. The site plan shows the required buffers along streams and wetlands and the Little Creek Greenway easement. It's hard to see on this small image, but the Little Creek Greenway easement is on the western side of the property. There are also 3 proposed stormwater management areas surrounding the development. Here are proposed townhome elevations, as is required with this rezoning request. In summary, the proposed zoning has a density that is comparable to allowable development under the current zoning. After Winston-Salem DOT review, as I mentioned on the site plan, the entrance off Somerset Drive was moved to the west to improve the sight lines, and a right turn slip lane and left turn stack lane were added to the design. Per the TIA, the Somerset Drive, Lockwood Drive, and Jonestown Road all have existing capacity for the projected trip generation of this development. The request is consistent with legacy recommendations in that it would offer a variety of housing choices in the area with a context-sensitive design, and the site plan conforms to UDO requirements and provides adequate buffering to natural features on site and to the surrounding neighborhoods. Staff recommends approval of the zoning request, and the site plan meets UDO requirements. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. McBride. Any questions for?
Just one. Sorry,
yeah.
Chairman. Sorry.
Ms. White.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Start
No,
here.
Melinda can go first.
All right.
I'll wait.
Thank you. Ms. White, I was wondering about the other opportunities for connectivity from this development. There seems to be some other streets that stub up close to this parcel, and wondering what the thinking was as far as not making those.
I know there's some topography issues with this site. Luke Dickey is here from Stimmel and may be able to speak more directly to how the site plan analysis moved forward with that in those connections, but my understanding is that there was some topography issues.
Okay, thank you.
My only question is, like, on the site plan, it looks like there's a lot of grading happening in the buffers. Is it just grading, or do they plan on doing anything else in the buffer?
Again, that's...
Luke? Okay. I'll wait. Sorry.
No, that's all right. Absolutely.
Mr. Bryan?
Yes, Ms. White, you say that the roads are adequate to handle the traffic in your
Excuse me.
presentation.
There will be a public hearing. This is the time for the board to inquire questions. Thank you.
It seems like you've got Somerset that is coming around, I guess, to sort of a gradual curving area there. And then you've got Lockwood. Is Lockwood built to city standards in terms of roadways?
Lockwood is a public street.
Yeah, I know it's a public street, but is it built to city standards?
Jeff Fansler is here and
Good.
can speak to those. I will say that per the TIA, both Somerset and Lockwood will be at a level of service A or B, even with this development. So again, any specific questions, I would refer you to Jeff.
And A and B would mean traffic, the level of traffic.
Level of service, yes.
Right. The other thing that impressed me in looking at this site and driving around the various, you can't see much of it, but, you know, of going around the site was there's a lot of water around this site. Are any of the proposed houses built beneath the level of the water that is in the surrounding area?
None of them are built within the floodplain area, and the topography.
But are they built beneath the height of topography of the water that surrounds the
I'll go back
site.
up to the site plan. So the site, basically, the topography moves from Somerset and drains or goes down towards Little Creek and those other stream areas. The stream areas are the lowest elevation. All the houses are built on the higher elevations.
Now, you have switch to the map that shows the body of water just south of this. Right, you just.
Yes.
Well, or that one.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the houses that you're
Yeah.
saying should be approved are not below the level of that body of water there?
See if I can get my mouse. Can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Yeah. So the edge of this body of water there's a creek that runs behind it. I'm not sure if you can see that blue line. And that creek, the land goes into that creek area. So the edge of that pond is actually higher than the creek. It drains back into the subject property. On the site plan, you can see, and again, you can see that they cross that one area where the pond is south, and they go over that creek area, and the houses are built to the east of where that creek area would be on a higher elevation.
So they'll be on a higher elevation?
Yes, per the topography.
What do we know about stormwater because of all of the ponds in this area? Have there ever been complaints of that from residents in this area?
Per the site plan requirements, stormwater management will require a stormwater management plan that they will have to review, and they will have to be permitted on both the quality and quantity that goes through this. And again, they will have to manage their stormwater off of this site. Again, the topography lends itself towards Little Creek.
Little Creek's not having any problems with flooding or anything like that?
I can't speak to that from the stormwater management.
Research that in terms of this?
So Stormwater reviewed this, and their staff made their comments.
Yeah,
and
okay. They didn't say?
They didn't raise any questions about that specific thing,
Do we
but they
have
will
any-
have to do a stormwater management plan.
Excuse me. Do we have anyone from Stormwater here today?
I'm not sure if there's anyone from Stormwater here today.
Okay.
There's not.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any additional questions for staff?
Just one.
Mr. Stillman, could you please speak in your microphone?
I'm sorry, thank you. And perhaps this is much more so a transportation department-related question. It looks to be that there could be great potential for the new street that runs from Lockwood to the north, to Somerset, for that to be used as a fairly significant cut-through. Is there any thinking about a required lower speed limit so as to sort of hold that at bay to start with?
I would refer that question to
Sure.
Jeff. I'm not sure what the proposed speed limit might be on that road,
Right.
or if there were problems in the future with cut-through traffic, the types of modifications they might be able to make.
But, Mr. Chair, if I can, before Jeff starts speaking, I wanted to address Melinda's first question about connectivity, and just to add to Tiffany's response about topography. Yes, on the west side, there is a street that stubs into this property, but obviously there are topographical challenges with crossing Little Creek. On the east side, you can see that there are a number of streets that look like they stub into this property, but there is an intervening property that kind of follows the eastern property boundary that will prevent connecting any streets to, I can't read the name of it. It looks like Sloan Drive and.
It's Sloan Drive and Gamble Drive, and there's
Yes.
a private street called Sparkling Place that's an intervening property that would not allow for connectivity unless that person agreed to it. And even with that, I mean, you're still kind of in the same situation with topography. I'm not saying there couldn't be another potential connection, but you do have an intervening property that would preclude it.
Let me do a follow-up on that. Now, we've got a beltway coming around here, Mr. Fansler. And if somebody was to get from this neighborhood to the new beltway, which one day will be built, correct, on the western leg there.
One can hope.
Would they go out to Jonestown and then go over to it?
From this neighborhood, well, excuse me, Jeff Fansler, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for letting me take a few minutes to speak. Particularly, Mr. Bryan, the likelihood of exiting from this neighborhood, you'll probably choose to go to the intersection of 158 and then get on it from there. That would be my assumption. But yeah, we're still several years out, and there's still a lot of design elements that are going to have to be considered with the Beltway. But that would be my assumption at this stage of the game.
Did the TIA take into account the fact that the Beltway was going to be built and people may be wanting to get to the Beltway quicker in terms of the distribution of traffic? I think they said 30% would go Lockwood, 60% would go the other way.
Yeah, it was 40 and 60, and you're right.
40 and 60, okay.
And it did reference that, and there's some context involved too that we have to understand. But yeah, it was made reference, and then understanding the growth projections of when these development will be built. This is, if my memory serves, this is a 2027 build year, and that would still predate the Beltway in this section. So there's still some forecasting elements that are unclear in that regard.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Jeff while he's up here?
I believe he was going to address mine.
All right.
Well, thank you, Jeff.
Terribly sorry, Mr. Stillman. So to be clear, I wanted to follow up. The in question, are we talking about the proposed street that would
Yes,
connect
sir.
between Lockwood and Somerset?
Yes, sir.
Two options, okay? Two options would exist. So the city could consider a neighborhood speed limit. You've seen those in neighborhoods throughout.
Sure.
That's a policy we have. We could consider that here. And we do that routinely with neighborhoods of this size. So a reduction, typically 25, it would be signed on usually the main access points as you come in from a public street, and it will be signed neighborhood 25. That's option one. Option two, and this is something that maybe few don't really understand, but there is, city has a traffic calming policy that does also applies to new developments. It's not just an existing problem, right? But it's stuff that are proposed, and we could consider traffic calming elements through the design, and the city could partner with that initiative should that we think that be a case. So it's something that we don't advertise a whole lot because of some maintenance concerns and some other impacts where we're planning for the what-if scenario, but that option certainly exists.
Do you mind explaining a little what traffic calming efforts mean? I'm seeing some faces in the audience not understanding.
Absolutely, Mr. Leake, Mr. Chairman. So traffic calming, the city has a pretty robust traffic calming policy. Basically, what that does is it engages with the community that have these traffic concerns on their streets, what we'll call their streets, for lack of a better term. But basically, it provides a city-funded avenue for city engineers and our transportation department to investigate traffic concerns that are brought to our attention by the neighborhoods, various neighborhoods. And essentially, a traffic analysis can be done. And our policy has over 30 unique items, what we call traffic calming devices, that we could apply to residential streets, okay? They have to meet certain qualifications. So we would do a traffic analysis. We would also do an assessment of the conditions of the road, of the size of, are there sidewalks, are there not? And we would basically score that. And should it score well enough, it would qualify for traffic calming. And then we would work, we usually ask that the neighborhood requesting this type of treatment form a committee. So we know who we're working with, and then it really champions that and gives the neighborhood a front to deal with the city and really champions that initiative through the neighborhood. But that we would work with them essentially. I hate to use the speed cushions, but it seems to be the one that is often selected out of our over 30 options. But we would then, move forward with them. There's some public engagement pieces, and the one thing to note is it does require 70% compliance with the neighborhood. So it involves you getting your colleagues and your neighbors on board to support this initiative. So, and then it would ultimately goes to City Council for approval, and then Winston-Salem DOT would carry out the installation and then monitor that, how it's done, and then make adjustments as it's needed.
Thank you, Mr. Fancher.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Jeff, if I could just ask one, and I wasn't aware of the policy for new construction, but obviously you wouldn't have the percentages and those kind of things. Is that you just kind of work that out with the developer on the front end as far as the construction plan approval process?
So that's a great question, and that is correct in a sense. There's some other, we have to work with that and make some assumptions, but yeah, essentially that is the process.
So will this be looked at pre-construction, or will it instead be reactive after the fact, or both?
So the answer to that is we haven't had that discussion honestly yet today.
Yeah.
So from this stage of the game, Mr. Stillman, I think it would be, given that we've obviously already heard some traffic concerns, it would be more of a reactive approach. But again, it would be, and again, this is a city partnership. This is not just something the developer needs to figure this out. We need to work with them to make sure that we're designing and developing something that we'll call them traffic one, and then not create a public street issue for the city, because we can't accept obvious maintenance issues and then expect to publicly maintain that. So it's a partnership, but it is, at this stage of the game, would likely be more of a reactive approach, just given that we're this far down the road. but still pre-development.
Mr. Bryan?
Thank you.
Are there turning lanes on Lockwood?
There are not.
Lockwood and Jonestown?
No, sir.
Did you discuss this with the developer about doing that?
So that's a good question, and the challenge is, and this is a challenge we have, this is not unique to this site, right? They occupy, you can just look at this map, and you can see how little public street frontage they occupy. And the challenge is, and we're not, by ordinance, not allowed just to go make, I would love for them to make improvements at Somerset and 158, right? It's just, there's challenges, we can't require them to go because they don't occupy that road frontage. So a lot of this work and intersection geometry design and traffic concerns need to be brought to DOT's attention, and then hold us accountable and make sure that we're following up and doing our due diligence, because we're tasked to do traffic safety work. And if there's an issue there, that's what we need to know about, and we need to start that investigation and see what needs to be done.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Vance. I think that's, as of right now, all the questions I see for you. So with that, we will have a public hearing on this case. We will start with the proponents. Again, each side would have a total of 12 minutes, and there will be no rebuttal period. We're going to have Luke Dickey, and then Bruce Hubbard, and then Royal Henshaw.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Luke Dickey with Stimmel Associates, 601 North Trade Street, Suite 200, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27101. I appreciate being an opportunity to present to you this case today. We're representing True Homes. Jeff Guinier is also here with True Homes, who's the developer. We're the site plan preparers. Also have Royal Henshaw with Davenport, who prepared the TIA, is here as well. Tiffany did a great job of kind of giving you an overview of the site. Again, just to kind of orient you, is the site here is in the middle. It has some limited frontage there on Somerset and then on Lockwood to the south. You can kind of see it in relation to Stratford Road, how Jonestown Road then kind of wraps around. And kind of in discussion that was made earlier with Mr. Steelman, thinking of this as a cut through. I'm not sure who would use it as a cut through as it comes to the neighborhood, because you have the connectivity of Somerset that goes directly to Jonestown and Stratford, as well as coming down from Jonestown that wraps all the way around from Stratford Road in those sections. So unless it's somebody maybe from in the actual vicinity area that's trying to cut through to avoid some other traffic in the surrounding neighborhoods, I'm not sure who would be using this to come. Once you're on Jonestown, once you're on Somerset, that's where the roads you're really going to be using from a traffic standpoint. Again, as this is part of the Southwest Suburban Area Plan, the existing zoning is RS9, so based on zoning, maximum lots permitted is 426. That equates to about a 4.84 units per acre. We do know this site has some constraints on it from floodplain and streams, so we know that you won't be able to achieve that from an overall design, just a straight up RS9. What we are before you is, with this 80-acre site, is to basically request to add the use of townhouses. True Homes is looking at a different type of product, so they want to be able to maximize their different type of uses on this site. So again, it's 115 single-family lots, 101 townhomes. The single-family lots basically are around the exterior perimeter, and then we tuck the townhomes on the inside from there, along with the common recreation area that you can see in the middle. So again, wherever we have single-family homes that are surrounding this site, basically you have single-family backing up to it, and then the townhouses are within the center. The proposed density overall, again, is 2.45, which is very comparable to the overall density of the neighbors around. For Huntington Woods is usually about, I think it's about a 1.8 units per acre. Ashford Drive, when you go up to that side, is about 2.2 units per acre. And there was a PRD that was approved, Creekshire up a little bit the way. That is about 3.45 units per acre. So that's just up a little bit up off Somerset. So we're really incomparable. If you look at the overall, for the most part, there is 2.2 units per acre. So we're right in that area. We have a minimum 15-foot type 2 buffer yard because we are asking for RM5 zoning. If we stay at RS9, we don't have any buffer requirements. Then we also, as mentioned, we carried that over along the Somerset frontage as well. Again, for the uses that were restricted, multifamily apartments are not going to be a permitted use. That has been struck from the permitted use from the zoning request. Environmental sensitivity, approximately 37 acres, once we got the final plan done, out of the total 88 acres is to be undisturbed, so 42%. Of course, the majority of that is within the floodplain area and stream buffers that surround the site. We could push the limits just a little bit further in regards to the provisions, what we can do in the floodplain. You can actually go to the 50% zone. So go from the floodway to the 100-year floodplain. You can fill 50% of that. We're not proposing to do that at all with this. We're staying out of that area, avoiding the wetlands. Also in relation to the stream buffers, it's keeping all of our grading out of the stream buffers as well. So right now we're really at the kind of the limits. So we're at that threshold of whether it's a 50-foot buffer or a 100-foot buffer. So on our site plan, we are actually showing 100-foot buffers on the site. Again, stormwater management is going to be required for the site, just based on the development and density. So we will manage that for water quality and water quality. In regards to Mr. Bryan, to answer kind of your question in regards to the ponds that are also surrounding the site on the upslope from we'll call it from the adjacent neighborhoods, especially the Huntington Woods. I know they're probably having problems because those weren't designed for, most likely with the times that these developments were done, it's probably just the drainage area was dammed so they can create a pond. The time frame of when these were developed were not for stormwater management requirements. So depending on how they're designed, you'd have to look at those and analyze it to see if they're actually designed for stormwater, if they were just more of decorative, aesthetic ponds that were kind of put into the area. But we have, in our site plan, we've kept everything away from those areas. So as pointed out originally, you can see the pond is right here. So the dam is located right here. So we've got our houses are outside of that area. So if that was to overtop and flow, it goes down into the creek that's directly below. So we make sure we're treating all of the water from our site into the stormwater ponds. None of the water from our site will go up into anywhere of Lockwood or into Huntington Woods or Ashford because everything flows down to Little Creek. We did have a neighborhood outreach. We sent out 433 invites. You can see the area here, the white line is the 500-foot buffer that goes around the site. That's what the requirements are for neighborhood outreach. Every property highlighted in red is who we sent an invite to it. We did an online Teams meeting. We had about 50, we'll have 50 people sign in to attend it. I'm not sure if there's 1 or 2 or 3 people that were, on that call, but we did have 50 people within that for that. We've had multiple phone calls and emails on this. We tried to be as responsive as possible to the overall requests for information and just kind of walk them through the process of what this is. Infill is what this is, the infill residential project that provides additional housing types, so that's the townhouses. The overall design and proposed density is compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods. Request is consistent with legacy and the area plan recommendations, and staff does recommend approval. I will mention also that we could have the option to come in as an RS9 PRD, and basically the small lot sizes, replace all the townhouses that we're showing in the middle with the small lots as well. Generally, the site plan would be the same. We still have the same connection up to Somerset. We'd have the connection down to Lockwood as well. That would probably result in about 190 total single-family lots. Kind of what we're showing here today. If you look at that from a traffic result, so right now I think the traffic analysis says about 1,900 plus trips. That would be actually about 1,800 plus trips then. So it'd just be a minimal reduction if we go all single family from that standpoint. So I appreciate it and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and hope you support us today. Thank you.
1 second, Mr. Dickey. Mr. Bryan?
Yeah, Mr. Dickey, this is a beautiful piece of property and obviously was at some point going to be developed. Did you ask the city to help with this property in terms of the access roads or anything like that, so that they wouldn't be retarding any development, that they could actually make some improvements that would make this really work for everybody?
So, of course, we go through the site plan submittal process. We did a sketch plan review.
Right.
We've had discussions with Winston-Salem DOT, with NC DOT on their kind of reviews, with these being Winston-Salem DOT roads. Obviously, the concern was on Somerset from the connectivity there on the curve. We worked with them, of course, on where we locate that primary entrance drive to provide for the turn lanes, and also the site distance basically to the west to make sure we meet the minimum requirements there. Lockwood is a concern, obviously, just because it's, it's an older residential road. Road. We ran into this before on the Ransom Road case. When you're looking at the traffic, whenever you're developing these infill larger sites, it gets to be a challenge then from that. But, those items were discussed at that point. But from a development standpoint, when developers with the rules and requirements, again, on Lockwood is the city's there. It's a public street for them to maintain.
And the city hadn't offered any help?
Not at this
Lockwood
point,
Road
no.
or anything?
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Dickey? All right, thank you, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you.
Mr. Hubbard?
About 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bruce Hubbard. I'm president of Hubbard Realty. Our address is 1598 Westbrook Plaza Drive, Suite 200, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27103. I grew up in Winston-Salem, been involved with the real estate business personally since 1975, and we have been involved with, fortunately, many developments in the community. Some of you may know of them, the Sherwood Forest, Oak Valley. We were involved with Woodgrove subdivision, Reedy Fork Ranch, a couple of the names, Meadowlands, which we're currently doing. Recently, we've just rezoned a piece of property known as Ardmore Commons, which is currently under development. So we're very knowledgeable about the land development activity. We realize that every home that is built creates more traffic. We understand that. We defer to the experts in traffic. We're here to build a wonderful community. We've had a lot of experience in doing that. We're very fortunate to have a builder with True Homes and very fortunate to have a land planner such as Stimel & Associates. And we're here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. Any questions for Mr. Hubbard? How much time is left?
4 minutes.
All right, 4 minutes, Royal Henshaw.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Royal Henshaw. I'm with Davenport. We prepared the traffic impact analysis for the site. Our address is 119 Brookstown Avenue, Winston-Salem 27101. And staff recommended I sign up. I told them I might speak as an expert, but I really just wanted to let you know that I'm available here to answer questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Henshaw?
I'd love to ask him a question. I don't think I could make it through all 40 pages of your analysis, though. Some of the information that we've been sent prior to this meeting has shown a lot of accidents on those roads around there. What's your analysis of that from a traffic standpoint? Are there ways to mitigate that? Is there something the city could do or whatever to help out in that?
There are two areas we are particularly took a look at. Number one is at the proposed site access. We understand that there was an accident, a fatal accident near that area. We also understand that was, I believe that was someone falling asleep at the wheel. But it is a curvy area, and we are working with both the developer at Site Civil and with Winston-Salem Department of Transportation to make sure that we can maximize the site distance in that area, and we work with them to position the site access to do that. There's both what we'd call a horizontal and a vertical concern, and so we're positioning the site access along the property frontage to best maximize that. We have plenty of site distance looking, it'd be looking right, leaving, which would be to the east of the site access. The concern is looking west to the left. Like I said, we're working with them to maximize. The other location is at the intersection of Somerset at US 158. We understand there's been some accidents there as well. And our recommendation at this time is to work with the timing of the traffic signals both to the north and to the south of that access such to create gaps that'll help vehicles turning left out to find gaps to get out. That's one of the kind of unfortunate situations there is that there is a existing signal a short distance to the north and an existing signal a short distance to the south, and that precludes the possibility of putting a traffic signal at this location.
Let me follow up on the question I asked Mr. Fansler. The Beltway's going to be built. It will give us access many different directions. How did you calculate the effect that that would have on there, or how much did you take that into account?
We took that into account in determining what the, what we call the trip distribution would be.
Yeah.
In other words, our assessment of which direction people would be turning left or right coming out of the various different site access points. The existence of the Beltway connection doesn't change the traffic in and out of the site. The traffic in and out of the site is fixed by the number of units, but it does influence where people might go left or right coming out of there. And so that did influence our choices for the pass by, or for the trip distribution.
So how do you make a guess about that?
Well, when you do a trip distribution, you start with your existing counts.
Right.
And so you look at the patterns that are existing there, and then you have to, when you're talking about a new element such as that, you're just talking about an estimate of maybe reassigning some trips that might turn, say, left onto US 158 and have that turning right instead, because that's going to be, it is an estimate, and that's all we can do is estimate with our best engineering judgment at this point.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. How much
There's
time?
about 3 minutes and 45 seconds.
We have 3 minutes and 45 seconds left if anyone would like to speak in support. All right. We will now turn to the opposition in case 3529. Presently, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 7 people signed up. First speaker is Samuel
Villegas.
Villegas, thank you.
Chairman Leake, members of the Planning Board, my name is Samuel Villegas. I live at 2581 Lockwood Drive with my wife Elizabeth. We've lived there for 44 years. I hope you've watched the video we've sent in and the prior submittals. We're opposed to this zoning change. The staff report says the area plan recommends single-family use, and there's no compelling reason to change that recommendation to multifamily, high density. It's out of character with the surrounding neighborhood. The so-called secondary entrance for this development is Lockwood Drive, a 25-mile-per-hour undivided street with no sidewalks. It would turn Lockwood Drive into an unwalkable thoroughfare. A number of serious accidents, as has been pointed out, have occurred at the corner of Lockwood and Jonestown Road. You'll hear more about that later. Keep the character of the surrounding neighborhoods as they are and deny this zoning request. It's just unsafe and adds too much traffic. 800 trips per day to Lockwood Drive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone who's here against this, please stand.
Thank you. How much time do we have left?
10 minutes.
All right. Elizabeth Carter.
I'm Elizabeth Carter, and I live at 2621 Lockwood Drive and oppose the rezoning request. I'm speaking on behalf of the many residents of the Lockwood and Huntington Woods neighborhoods who have serious concerns about pedestrian safety. Lockwood Drive and surrounding streets are identical to when my family built the home in the mid-1960s. It is a narrow street with no center lane dividing, no curbs, no gutters, and of course no sidewalks. Mailboxes are at the edge of the pavement. We, when possible, maintain lawns to the pavement edge. Over decades, stormwater has flowed down the street to the dead end and floodplain below, cutting sloping low areas and, in some places, deep ditches. This and other streets in the long-established neighborhoods are used frequently and on a daily basis for exercise, often with dog, children, bikes, tricycles, seen the occasional baby stroller. Large vehicles such as school buses, delivery vans, and landscaping trucks with trailers most often drive the center of the street because of the before-mentioned issues. In summary, these neighborhood streets are our sidewalks. Please consider our serious safety concerns and vote no.
8.5 minutes.
All right, we have Preston Corbett.
Could I get that slide that Mr. Bryan was referring to earlier up on there, please?
Which slide? Is it in the
The
staff report?
one where they showed the ponds. No, that's good enough. That's fine. Great, thank you. My name is Preston Corbett. I live at 1624 Briar Lake Circle, 27103. In February 2011, I set up a Facebook page for Huntington Woods. One of the biggest problems that have surfaced through the last few years is the fact of water outages. We've had 20 water outages that have been posted on that Facebook page during that period of time. Now, I can only imagine that the addition of these 233 homes is going to exacerbate that particular problem. Another concern of mine is the unauthorized utilization of the 3 private ponds that are on the boundaries of this subdivision. As you can see, the 3 up there to the south of the development. My lot incorporates about 1/3 of Briar Lake, so I have a great concern about unsupervised children from the proposed subdivision fishing and or swimming on the pond and the liability it presents. Furthermore, the 6 homeowners bordering Briar Lake have gone to great lengths to landscape and beautify the pond and make it a peaceful, bucolic place for all the neighbors to enjoy. The tranquil setting will be deeply impacted by the additional traffic that will result from the proposed subdivision residents that are trying to avoid the queue that will inevitably form at the corner of Lockwood and Jonestown, especially when you have people coming from Lockwood from the other side trying to turn left, and they always try to cut through. There are going to be a lot of wrecks there. Finally, I'd like to talk to what Ms. Bryan was referring to about these ponds. These ponds there to the south of them. There's 2 of them right there. In 2020, epic rains flooded both Briar Lake and were spilling over the entire length of the dam on the bigger pond down there. Any subdivision built on this land is almost surely to have to be built a bridge to accommodate this kind of water going over there. Otherwise, another pond's going to be created, or it's going to flood that particular road too. I believe the connector to Lockwood Road is an unacceptable solution, and I vehemently oppose that connection there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corbett. Mr. Hank Ballard.
6 minutes.
6 minutes, thank you.
All right, short and quick. My name's Hank Ballard, 2532 Huntington Woods Drive. I am deeply opposed to this development. A couple of things have come up while I've even been sitting here. The density question has been brought in as a high point for this development. However, of the 88 acres that they're looking at developing, almost half of that cannot be developed ever. So they can't count a floodplain in a density quotient. So their actual density per person is 5.3 units per acre, not the information they've given you before. Also, the traffic study that they've had and they brought in, the Lockwood Road, they have it misidentified. They have the sizes wrong. It's not built for this kind of development. There's no way the road will survive their construction. Lastly, they have been very forthcoming about the development. However, the information they gave us originally has been changed. So they have sold us one bill of goods originally and have changed it to something else. To keep in the nature with the development, it needs to be along the same size as our neighborhood homes, anywhere from 2,500 to 4,500 square feet. The ones that they're leading with now are now 1,600 square feet. You got a 40-foot lot that they're going to try to put a house on it with the setbacks. So the house can only be 25 feet wide. Well, you either put a two-car garage in there and a 5-foot door, or a single car. That was not what they originally brought up in the development questions when they provided this information to us. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Nope. Thank you. How much time?
4 minutes and 20 seconds.
All right. Mr. Joseph Anderson.
Where did it go? I'm sorry. Here we go. This is you, right? Opposition to high density?
Yeah, is it revised? Is that the revised one?
I believe so, yes.
Can you check? Should say revised.
Updated this afternoon.
Okay. And which button do I push?
That's what.
You sure? Push it. All right. That's great. Thank you. My name is Joseph Anderson. Good afternoon. I'll try to be as quick as I can. I live at 1862 Lake Point Drive with my family, 27103. We're opposed to this. A lot of it has to do with the lack of access, and that's been pretty much admitted here to you. These two access points are just not, it's not feasible. And we're here to ask you to keep it at RS9. They're here to ask you to change it to something different. And as such, I submit to you that they have the burden to convince you that it can be done in a good and safe way at this location, and it can't. This is Lockwood Drive here. It's a narrow, undivided road, lots of pedestrians, kids learning how to ride bikes, 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, dog walkers, hardly any traffic currently. They're talking about putting an additional 800 car trips per day. And this is all going to go up towards the dangerous intersection with 45-mile-an-hour Jonestown Road. Now, Jonestown Road is busy. It's the gateway to Starbucks and Highway 421 to downtown. It's the gateway to the east to Stratford Road, Food Line, the restaurants, Haynes Mall. And there's already been numerous accidents at that location. And that is without adding 800 car trips per day. It's not a good fit. It's not a good fit. It's dangerous. Now they go to Somerset Drive. Now this is a busy road with high-speed travel, and there have been 81 accidents in the last few years between Jonestown and Stratford alone on that road because people speed on Somerset. A lot of these are injury accidents. They're talking about adding 1,200 car trips per day. I'm running through accidents that have happened here just in the last few years without adding another 1,200 car trips per day. Now, they come to Somerset at Jonestown. When they come, if they come out to the left, the one that the gentleman said would be the most dangerous direction to come out of this proposed development, they go down the steep hill and they end up at Jonestown. And this is an uncontrolled intersection where there's already numerous accidents. Here's pictures I took driving home just about a week ago. Another crash right there at the corner. It's just common knowledge. And here's more crashes, and that is without adding 1,200 more car trips per day. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do this, there will be cars backed all the way up from Jonestown down Somerset all the way to the exit to this development. That's what's going to happen. That's a fact. Now let's look at the actual proposed entrance. We all call it Dead Man's Curve. That's the truth, because people have died there. There's the police right there, parked down there. This is exactly where they're talking about putting the entrance. If you can see my mouse, they're talking about putting it right there. Now, I understand they've moved it a little bit, and they're going to try to move it to make the sight lines a little bit less dangerous. But that's where they're talking about putting it, and there have been numerous accidents there already. And this is without adding 1,200 cars per day. Ladies and gentlemen, high-density rezoning should be denied. It doesn't make common sense. Thank you. And the accident reports, by the way, if anyone wants to see them, I have full copies right here.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. How much time?
1 minute.
We have 1 minute left. Lisa Garcia. Ms. Garcia, before you speak, I want to address the planning board. So we have Lisa Garcia and Daryl Hawkins left. Are you okay if we give a few extra minutes for those two to speak?
Please.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, a certain amount?
5 minutes, is that enough?
5 total?
5 total, yes.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for hearing all of us from this neighborhood. My name is Lisa Garcia. I live at 1005 Somerset Drive in Winston-Salem, 27103. So I'm on the higher end of Somerset Drive towards Jonestown. And I witnessed a crash right in front of my house where a young lady was coming up Somerset. She lost control of her vehicle and flipped her car over practically in my driveway. And you know, I work at the hospital. I ran out and helped her. Numerous accidents have happened. My kids play in my driveway. They ride their bikes. School buses pick up right in front of our houses. And so many times cars are zooming past. I do realize that the fire station down the road and the police department right down the road on Somerset do need to use that as access, but the speed limit currently is 35 miles per hour. People do not go 35 miles on our road. They go upwards of 45, 50 miles an hour, especially coming down the road and going back up past my house. Once they get to Jonestown Road, they could turn left or right, and typically, if there's any additional traffic, that can be all the way backed up to my house, which is pretty far from that corner. And my concern is with my kids going to school, riding these school buses, the traffic not being controlled. There's not a light at the top of Somerset, and there's not a light at the bottom of Somerset to get onto Stratford Road. I'm worried that kids are going to be in the street getting run over. There's going to be dogs, pets, animals from that neighborhood, from that wooded area, are going to be in the roads, more accidents, more people having more difficulty with their families. So that's my concern. That's what's closest to my heart. Thank you for listening to us.
Thank you.
Slightly less than 3 minutes, 2:57.
Daryl Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Planning Board. I'm Daryl Hawkins. I live at 2277 Ashford Drive, 27103. I'm also a local realtor here and have been for several years, and I understand the need for housing more than probably a lot of other people. However, this is not the answer that we need in this area. The safety concern that you've heard from all of these people is overwhelming. Our house is the first house on Somerset Drive. There's only one way in and one way out. So when we come out on Somerset from Ashford, we can go straight across onto Brandywine, left or right. I make those trips every day, multiple times. And when you come out, you've got to play sort of the Russian roulette to get out safely, okay? That is only going to get worse with 1,200 on our side, the Somerset side, of trying to get out safely when you've got traffic coming over from Brandywine, you've got traffic coming both ways of Somerset, and you have 105 homes in Ashford that have to come out that way. A lot of those homes, I don't believe, got the invitation, if I looked at the map correctly. They're back in the back part of Ashford, so I don't think they really have seen all of the information about what's happening with Somerset Heights. I just plead with you, all of these numbers that you have seen, they're true. We see them every day. It's a Grand Prix across there. The cops, the traffic, they go down one curve, up a hill, they're flying. There's all those kids up there on the upper end of Somerset. It's just too dense in there. So I plead with you to say no. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right.
There's a minute left. I don't know. I mean, yeah.
So there's a minute left if someone wants to take that opportunity to say something maybe that we've not heard. All right. If you could state your name, address, and zip code for the record, please.
My name is Donna Pro. My dad is 87, so I'm here representing him. I grew up at 2500 Lockwood Drive, Winston-Salem, 27103. His property is right across from where the entrance will be coming out. Basically, what I'd like to state is the storm drainage on his property. He is at the very end of the road at Lockwood, and there is so much water. When it really rains, it's like a lake down at the bottom. I am concerned about the storm drainage. That's pretty much what I'd like to say. And I definitely oppose this. And I am also a realtor, and I do realize that we do need housing. I just don't think, if there was more outlets, I think it, might possibly work, but I definitely oppose the multifamily. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. All right. So with that, I am going to declare the public hearing closed.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask staff a question?
Yes.
Ms. White, in looking at your report, there are uses allowed in RS9 zoning, which the property is currently zoned RS9, correct?
Yes.
And there's all these permitted uses that don't require rezoning, everything from daycare, recreation facilities, swimming pools, churches. None of those would require rezoning like the petitioner's doing.
Correct.
All right. What would be the traffic impact of those uses compared to the proposed uses for this petition?
I would probably have to get Jeff back up here, and it would also depend on how many churches, how many, on the 88 acres, how many churches,
Gotcha.
how many schools, how many of those things.
So maybe Mr. Fansler can tell us, do those uses tend to generate more or less trips per day than residential? Per acre, maybe. I don't know. Obviously, you're not going to build 88 churches there. I get that. But.
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Mr. Grubbs, that is a tough question, but I will do my best to make an intelligent response. There's a lot of contingencies and a lot of what ifs that go into that, basically size, use, scale. For example, you have to think about permitted times and uses. Like, for example, if it's a recreational facility, obviously there's events that could swing the traffic generation. By and large, a lot of those recreational type uses are seasonal, so you have seasonal trips. But if I had to put a more or less per acre, giving the site constraints, it would probably generate a little bit less. And if it's recreational in scale in a neighborhood, it tends to generate more foot traffic. So there's the use of foot traffic that would be available to use that instead of a single-use car trip. I hope that answers your question, but there's so much that goes into that, it's hard to say exactly.
Thank you very much.
I've got a question for staff. I don't know who wants to answer it, but I know it's come up, but all right, it's RS9 right now, so the developer, probably Mr. Corley, probably you, the developer can get, is it 190 units?
Microphone, please.
I'm sorry. The developer can currently, without a rezoning petition, without having to file anything, and just coming in front of us for planning board review with no public hearing on this, can get 190 units, or approximately 190 units. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I'll actually answer that. I mean, there's been...
They come into us with a PRD.
Right, yeah, I mean, there's been some testimony today, that talked about, the floodplain and that being undevelopable, and while that is true, our ordinance has a provision called a planned residential development that allows you to cluster your development in areas that we say we want it, and keep out of areas that are environmentally sensitive and those type of things. And the ordinance does not give a penalty for doing that. So in other words, you get the full benefit of your 88 acres by clustering your property, or by clustering your development in the areas where you should develop. With that being said, the 88 acres as a PRD could, if you could make it work, it's not practical, but the underlying density would allow 425 units out there. Now, we've heard testimony from Luke with Stillman Associates that says that, that he feels like that, versus what they have proposed, which is 216 units, I believe, with a mix of single family and townhomes. He testified that that they had kind of looked at it and thought they probably could realize 190 units. And those 190 units would only, if this were to be denied by the council, if it goes that far, they could come back in today, or after denial, they could resubmit for a planned residential development planning board review item that would be approved by this body, and there would be no public hearing. It would essentially be a compliance check with the UDO. But again, to answer your question, by the zoning, 425 units. It sounds like from a practical fitting it on the site, 190 units.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, this is a tough one because we've got land that obviously is going to be developed. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of place and wonderful neighbors, and as we see here, and things like this. But it almost seems to me like the city's getting in the way of developing this, because you've got to have a way to get in and out. And no matter whether it's going to be developed as a PRD or whether it's going to go this way. And I was just wondering, before we move into a vote, I mean, is Mr. Hubbard at all interested in working with the city to like upgrade Lockwood? I think they're already upgrading on Somerset, but is there some way to upgrade that so it becomes safe? Because we need a solution to this regardless of this proposal here, because as everybody says, I mean, tomorrow they could begin a PRD, and the neighbors would have the same problem. And I don't know how to solve it, make it safe for people, and unless there's a way to the city to go in and make Lockwood a safe place with the right signage and everything, and on Jonestown and stuff like that.
George,
I'm just sort of stuck.
I welcome that, George, but let me say this. I think and I'm not going to speak for him, would probably welcome the city stepping in and doing that. But that should not be his responsibility alone. He cannot carry the burden of making public goods and public works part of his job. He has almost a landlocked site. Frankly, he has 2 access points, and he's doing the best he can with those 2 points. There's nothing else. There's no other place for this unless we go by other takings, and that's just far more complicated than it's worth.
Yeah. I mean, I think Mo raises a good point that I've brought up before, which is, fortunately or unfortunately, this is the Winston-Salem County Planning Board, not the Winston-Salem County Planning Streets and Thoroughfares Board. I think there are many instances where the folks sitting up here wish that it were both, because oftentimes the solution to planning problems is better road infrastructure, and sometimes better planning helps with road infrastructure. But we have to look at this from a perspective of, is this within the framework of the comprehensive plan? And is it, a reasonable use for this particular area? I get that it might not be, it's certainly not the status quo, and it may not be what a majority of the neighborhoods want. I think Mr. Bryan's point was sort of the be careful what you ask for because you might get it thing. This might be a better alternative than a PRD. I hear multifamily thrown around, and I'm not sure that's really the correct use of multifamily. These are townhouses, not apartments. And I know there's sometimes that could be a distinction without a difference. In this case, I don't believe it is. So, we can't make decisions as a planning board solely based on whether it creates more traffic or potential traffic hazards. That's not what we're sitting up here to do, unfortunately.
Sewage treatment has not been addressed. That is a problem here.
All right, did that come from the audience?
What?
I heard someone say something. Did that come from the audience?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. The public hearing is closed.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
May I ask Mr. Dickey a question?
Sure.
Mr. Dickey, could you come up again, please? If you could put up a map of the development again for me, please. My original question, which I'm not sure I got a full answer yet on, was, are there other opportunities for making connections? I mean, I know you've got the two, and I know that the site is difficult because of the topography, but this is where I'm stumped, is because I really feel like there needs to be, for this to be acceptable, there needs to be more connections to. You've got all these streets all around it, and you're dumping traffic on a curvy road and a small neighborhood street. And how is there any way to improve the situation here?
Yep, so that's a good question, and I think this plan here will roughly show our constraints that we have with the site. So Still Point Drive is on the western side, but we have Little Creek in the floodplain and everything else associated with that, so we're really blocked to the west to be able to make any further connections. Somerset Cove it comes off of Somerset there. That doesn't quite, it's close, but it does not stub into the property, so we really have no ability to give the connection up there. As you can see,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Why does it not stub? Because there's a spike strip right there? Is that what?
So, yeah, I'll get to that one on the eastern side. Yep, so we got the stream and we got the ponds there on the north, so we really have no other connection on the north to get up to Somerset. On the south side, where Huntington Woods Drive is, Lake Point Drive, we've got the stream right there. So the only actually frontage then we have is on Lockwood. On the eastern side, where you see Gamble Drive here, and you see Sloan Drive. Sloan Drive would be very difficult to connect to because, again, we have a lot of topography and we have the stream to get across in that area. Gamble Drive is right at the end of that stream, that location, but what is really blocking us there is, again, there is a property owner. Their drive is what accesses. It comes all the way down the side of the eastern side of the site, so we have no way to tie into the Sloan or Gamble in those locations because of that that private property, which serves this lot right here with this house down here by the lake. So we are blocked Sloan by topography issues and stream, and then we're also now with an intervening private property in between the two.
Have you talked to the owner of that driveway to see if they would be amenable to?
No, we have not initiated those conversations because based from fire code and requirements, we have to have 2 access points. We're meeting those requirements for our lots. Plus, if we looked at Gamble Drive potentially as an option, fire may or may not accept that as a secondary means of access because of its close proximity to the entrance. So we have to have certain separation issues that we have to have for our 2 access points into the site.
Okay, and then regarding the 2 ponds that are not in the parcel but are outside it. Have you accounted for, in your plan, the possibility of overtopping of those ponds and where the water would go?
Yep, so with the one off of Lake Point Drive, you can see we don't have any houses near that area, so that would all dump and come into the existing creek that comes through, and then we have our road crossing here. We would have to obviously size that for any water that's going to go underneath that road connection. For the one here that's off of Briar Lake Road, the dam's running across here, so you can see we don't have any lots below that dam where it would overtop. All of our lots are to the east of that area, so everything would flow into the lower lying areas of the wetlands. There is no stream that's been designated from the environmental consultant that's gone out here, but there are wetlands, so there is a drainage ditch that kind of comes through there, but there's not a jurisdictional stream in those locations. So obviously when we make that connection to Lockwood, we do have to model the amount of water that's going to be coming through there so that we don't dam everything. So there will be probably a size culvert to be able to make that connection through, and would that have to be properly sized for the drainage area that is coming through that location.
Thank you.
Did you address the Somerset Cove? I didn't, or maybe I missed that. Why there was no connection there?
Yeah, I can't remember. Our label is covering it up. I'm not sure if it stubs all the way to our property line, but you can see we've got a pond, and these are streams right there, basically right at the end of where Somerset Cove would be.
Okay, I thought it was trees.
Yep.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Dickey, you don't happen to know off the top of your head, the address for the property on Lake Point Drive that's served by the driveway, do you?
No, I don't have that, no.
Okay. Anybody happen to know that?
It may be.
Joseph and Grace Anderson, it appears.
That's me.
Oh, okay. Well, there's your solution. Your neighbor can help you.
I guess I'm not allowed to speak, right? I mean, obviously, I'm opposed to this development.
All right. I think
I'm opposed to the high density, and it's been said, well, you're only going to have another couple hundred cars a day.
Thank you, Mr. Groves.
But we'd rather go without those couple hundred cars a day.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Dickey? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So, I think it's safe to say that we've pointed out several things today. Number one, it's a beautiful piece of property. I'm very familiar with Somerset Cove and the Somerset development. It's a beautiful piece of property. At some point, it's going to be developed into something. I think the challenge for us, I think Mr. Grubbs pointed out perfectly, our job sometimes is really to make sure that it's consistent or inconsistent with the plan. That's what we're voting on. I wish we had the ability to vote on streets and everything else that needs to be done. I mean, traffic patterns have already been proven. There are a lot of accidents. There was a fatality. Unfortunately, those are things that is beyond our scope. We don't have the authority. We can talk to staff and recommend that things get looked at, but that's the best that we can do at that point. So I'm just putting that out there. I hear the neighbors loud and clear. I understand. I'm sorry, sir, the public hearing is closed. We hear the concerns, and I hope staff and the developers are hearing the concern if this does go forward. If it does go forward, there would be another opportunity for the neighbors to speak. Our vote is simply a recommendation that then goes to the next body, and you would have the same opportunity there for those who have a little bit more authority than we do to say yay or nay.
And if it does go forward, the folks that it goes forward to have a lot more control over streets and thoroughfares than we do, although a lot of these are state maintained roads, so their hands are tied somewhat too. But your points about traffic are not invalid points. Correct. And if it goes forward, the city council is going to be in more of a position to do something about it than the folks sitting up here are.
Right. All right. So with that, if there's no other discussion, what is the pleasure of the board?
I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan for W3529.
There's a motion by Ms. McCray. Who seconded that? Second by Mr. Lamb. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? One opposed, Mr. Bryan.
Well, then I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3529.
Second.
Motion by Ms. McCray, second by Mr. Lamb. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
2. All right, it does pass. Thank you. Neighbors, thank you for coming out, and we will give everyone a moment to clear the chamber because we do have another case.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, if you would give us a few minutes to allow folks to, I don't want to presume that you may want to do this. You may want to take a 5-minute recess to allow these folks to leave, because we also have to bring in the folks for the other case from the committee room.
Do we need to make a motion for a 5-minute recess? All right.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recess for 5 minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll recess for 5. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We have a motion to come out of recess.
So moved.
All right, second.
Second.
All right, all in favor, aye? Aye. All right, we are now back out of recess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next case we'll hear is case B9 F1617, and we will hear from Mark Allred.
Thank you. Yes, we're here to talk about F1617, the petitioner's C&M Family Limited Partnership, Cecil Hash and Margaret Armfield. The site is 318.99 acres on the west side of Idles Road, south of Mallard Trail. The request is a special use rezoning from YR, AG, and RS30 to YRS, RS15S, and RM5S. The development is partially in GMA4, which is our future growth area, and partially in GMA5, which is our rural area in the southwest corner of the county. The development, because it's a complicated rezoning, I'll work from west to east. Tract 4 is 171.59 acres. This is what is being rezoned from YR to YRS, or is being petitioned to be rezoned. Tracts 2 and 3, tracts 1 and 2 are 113.79 acres that are AG and RS30 to be rezoned to RS15S. And then tract 3 is 32.21 acres from AG to RM5S. Okay. And the arrow we see here is the southwestern and northern portions of the property are agriculture livestock. And the middle portion is a wooded area. Kind of surrounding it to the west side is the Yadkin River. To the north is Tanglewood. To the east of the northern section is Idles Road, and RS30 is the subdivision that's just to the east. See if I got a pointer here. Yeah, so here we go. RS30 is just to the east. And bringing up the area that's closest to that's using sewer at the moment is in Clemens, is zoned RS15, which is way up here in the corner, barely on the map. This is a picture from Idles Road. On your site, this would be to the right of the pond will be where you see your townhomes. That'll be RM5S. This is the intersection with Fox Park Road looking north on Idles Road, Fox Park Road. And this is the Tanglewood Golf Course. This picture was taken from the middle of the property, and I will discuss that in a couple slides. Here is the site plan because I want to again work from west to east. There's a quarter-mile buffer between the development and the Yadkin River that the developer is proposing here. There's a 30-foot minimum perimeter buffer around the entire site except the middle area, which again I'll discuss at another slide. There's a 100-foot thoroughfare open space along Idles Road. The passive open space that's being provided, this is a PRD. The passive open space that's being provided is 125 acres. The active open space is 3.32 acres. And to the east, right here, is Idles Road Lift Station. This is the reason why this development is here. The Idles Road Lift Station provides sewer services to this area. Because of that, it can treat GMA we can treat GMA4 as a GMA3 when public sewer is available. The density of GMA4 can be more consistent with GMA3. So, if zoning is approved, the density allowed on this development, looking at the site plan as a whole, is 1.77 dwelling units per acre, or 564 units. The density being proposed is 1.68 dwelling units per acre, or 537 units. This is the northern section. The zoning divide between RM5S and RS15S is Riverwalk Main Street. The townhomes are positioned in a spot where they are totally surrounded by, well, they're not neighboring any single-family residential homes. They are surrounded by Tanglewood to the west and north, and Idles Road to the east. And this is a vacant lot on the other side of the railroad tracks. Phase 1A, which is most of this area, is 74 townhomes and 71 single-family homes. Phase 1B is the 64 townhomes, just sort of circular in the middle. There is a right turn lane onto Riverwalk Main Street that is being proposed, and a right turn lane onto Fox Park Drive. Riverwalk Main Street has a median dividing the ingress and egress. You can see right here. Again, if you remember that picture of Tanglewood, the golf course, this is where I'm going to discuss this. There is no adequate space north of this street for the buffer area. The reason why that is because there's a Davie County sewer easement that cuts through here. An alternate compliance to help with privacy and noise is an opaque fence. The opaque fence will be between the two active spaces that you see here and in between. And this is the southwest section of the development. This is where your single family, the bulk of your single family homes are at. You've got phase 2, which is this bigger section here, which is 126 single family homes. Phase 3 is 114. And then over here on the side, phase 4 is 88 single family homes. And again, the quarter-mile buffer is here. We did have some modified conditions that are based on the TIA and the interdepartmental review comments. So part of the TIA was widening the southbound approach of Middlebrook Drive in Clemens to provide a 2-lane approach with exclusive left and right turn lanes, including a minimum of 125 feet of storage and appropriate taper lengths. This should be completed prior to phase 3. Widening the southbound approach of Heidel Road to provide a right slip lane at Riverwalk Main Street, including a minimum of 50 feet of storage and appropriate taper length. This is prior to completion of phase 1. And the widening the southbound approach of Heidel Road to provide a right slip lane at Fox Park Drive, including a minimum of 50 feet of storage and appropriate taper length. So, in summary, the public utilities that have come into this area will be available to a larger portion of the county's population. This will provide more options for property owners on how they want to develop their land. And it gives more areas to accommodate for growth. The request will increase the variety of housing types in the area, stated goal of legacy. A large percentage of the site is left undisturbed or proposed as undeveloped open space. Because that staff recommendation for zoning was approval, site plan does meet UDO requirements. Questions?
Yes, Ms. Nannery?
Yes, Mr. Allred. Can you show us on the map where the GMA5 is located?
That's right. The gray line that you see right through here.
Okay, that's the dividing line. Okay.
Yeah, so this one is interesting because YR and GMA5 are the same. They have the same as that boundary line.
Okay. All right, and I also see you've got a sewer lift station on there.
And I'm thinking it's right
down there by the pond. That's also in GMA5, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Couple of questions.
Yep.
Your conclusion is that this fits with legacy, even though legacy says we should be keeping agricultural land?
So it was, I'll say, most cases are easy discussions with staff. This one was a discussion we had. What we had to do is look at the overall site. So if this development was just in YR, we would have an issue. It wouldn't be, we wouldn't recommend approval, but because you're looking at the entire site as a whole, that's what we looked at as recommending the approval to. Because the density as a whole is less than what would be required, which is the 1.77.
Okay, I'm not coming to the same conclusion that you're coming to in terms of my understanding of legacy. The other thing is you mentioned an alternative compliance on the buffer near the golf course there. Isn't the only reason they don't have the buffer is because they want to build houses there?
I would leave that up to the builder to answer that question.
Well, I mean, isn't there room in that strip of land to have a buffer that's appropriate?
The buffer.
There's the dimensions that are in there, right?
There's a force main there, and you can't be within a certain distance of the force main.
Of the what?
Force main. It's a sewer line that's under pressure.
Okay, so you could have a consistent buffer running along there if you didn't have development in there, right?
It took me a second to think about what you were saying, but now I do. So basically what you're asking is why is the road not somewhat straighter? Part of the issue is there's two ponds too that are dead in the middle of the property. So they were staying their buffer away from the ponds plus the force main. So that's where the squeeze of the street is at.
Now, the other question has to do with lift stations. And is this lift station owned by Forsyth Utilities, Public Utilities? Is that correct?
Which one?
I mean, our public utilities that has to do with utilities and...
The Idles Road lift station labeled here is a Forsyth County, a Winston-Salem Forsyth County utility lift station.
So I'm trying to understand, we're a planning board, and we try to control development by looking at sewage and access to sewage and things like that. And so now we have a sewage lift station here. Does that mean that we should change what we're thinking about in terms of density and spread now because utilities is putting in a sewer here? You see what I mean? I mean, we traditionally have controlled this by where you could access sewage. And the case down at Conrad that hasn't come to us is, got similar constraints around that issue as well. I'm just confused by how we're doing planning for Forsyth County here.
Well, to answer your question, there was a concerted effort by city county utilities in conjunction with Davie County and Forsyth County who put money into this lift station. So, the lift station was outside of the control of this board, our staff.
Right, it's city county.
So, it's one of those things where there is going to be part of a larger discussion, and it's kind of a three-pronged discussion. You have some policy decisions that the Utility Commission needs to make regarding private lift stations and infrastructure that gets put into public lift stations. You have city county utilities, which are, they're in the beginning stages of doing a water and sewer master plan, looking at sewer basins, sewer sheds, to determine strategically what areas possibly could be sewered. And then you also have the comp plan for 2045, which we'll discuss more at work session as we continue to move towards launching that public initiative this fall. All those things will kind of coalesce. With Legacy and Legacy 2030, there was an identified desire to keep sewer within the Muddy Creek Basin and not look at expanding outside of those areas, but that plan did identify future growth areas. What we have found we had an abundance of inventory of lots of previously approved developments that we were kind of sitting on from 2007, 2008 recession. As we've come out of the recession, a lot of those lots have been are in the process of being developed. Most of the vacant property that's left, you either have issues like the case we heard earlier where there are concerns, or you're having to look kind of outside the basin for development. So I believe as we move forward with the comp plan, that's one of the things we'll need to discuss. We're either going to have to find ways to intensify within the Muddy Creek Basin, which may mean looking at missing middle housing, looking at having attached homes and those kind of things within single-family residential. We might have to look at, again, being more strategic in our growth corridors, dealing with intensification of, multifamily and other things along those growth corridors. Or we may have to look at extending outside of the Muddy Creek Basin in areas where we think it makes sense to do that, or it may be a combination of all that. And I think it's going to be legacy, it's going to be their master plan, and it's going to be the policy of the utility commission that's going to kind of dictate that. So again, that's a long-winded answer, but to answer the question, the lift station's there, and that has prompted the assemblage of this property and the request that's before you today.
Now, in your written report, there was a mention of how the town of Clemens felt about this. You didn't mention that in your presentation. What is their feeling about this?
So Clemens did not support it, but the reason why I did not mention the Clemens reason why I did not mention the Clemens comprehensive plan is because it was not adopted by the county. Therefore, it's not a tool that I could specifically use in making a recommendation. So in actuality, we have the legacy plan, but there is no comprehensive plan for this area.
There is no small area plan.
Small area plan, thank you.
That's been considered by the planning board or the elected body of Forsyth County. It's one of those things that was, I don't want to say it was short-sighted, it was a mistake, but back whenever we started the small area plan process and looked at those boundaries, Clemens looked at areas outside of their zoning authority, and we didn't include that in our area, the area they included in their plan. The problem with that is when we get requests in that area, we don't have an area plan to fall back on. So it kind of leads us to have to go back to legacy whenever we come to this board and to the county commissioners, because the county commissioners don't want, and again, I'm paraphrasing and kind of generalizing, but I don't think that they want to be dictated to as far as what their recommendation is from another unit of government. So we take a look at what legacy says in this context, not the Clemens plan. Now, again, we did reach out for their input, and it was included in your packet.
So we have to fall back on legacy, which says don't develop agricultural and don't develop GMA 5.
Well, I mean, again, it also says whenever sewer is available in the future growth area that it should be intensified to
maximize return on
GMA 3 standards. So, I mean, again, just like with any plan, just like with any comprehensive plan, just like with any small area plan, there are kind of pros and cons on both sides of the equation, and whenever we were looking to formulate our recommendation, we looked at what the future growth area said whenever public sewer was available, that it was appropriate to intensify the density comparable to what would be allowed in GMA 3 for residential.
I completely understand what George is saying. I think this really might be a good topic for a work session, or maybe some kind of joint session with the utility commission, because I really feel like us getting our new comprehensive plan and their strategic plan aligned. I mean, this is going to be an issue we're going to deal with for the next 20 years, where somehow or another we're going to figure out how to put sewer somewhere where we've never thought it possible, because that's the only way to continue to develop. And you're going to have lots of instances just like this where we thought one thing was going to happen until the dynamic changed. And so, I mean, these folks probably would prefer we talk about it in a work session so we can get on with the hearing. But George raises a good point, and I think it's a problem we're going to have to figure out long term. So.
Thank you. Any additional questions? All right. Well, we will have a public hearing on this matter. Again, 12 minutes for each side. There would be no rebuttal period. Looking at the proponents, we have Luke Dickey, Greg Garrett, and I think this is Chase Smith.
All right, very good. Hello again, Luke Dickey with Stimmel Associates, 601 North Trade Street, Suite 200, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27101. I'm happy to bring you another complicated project to review today. We are representing R.S. Parker Homes, who's the developer for the site. Greg Garrett is here, and he will speak after me. I also have Chase Smith with RKA, so Ramey Kemp Associates, in regards to traffic engineering. Mark did a great job of kind of, again, stealing my thunder and walking through the site plan. So overall, again, this site is about 319 total acres. The request is zoned to YRS, so taking the YR to YRS. The portion that's AG and RS30 to RS15S, and then RM5S to allow for the townhouses there on the upper corner. Total units is 537 with 399 single-family lots and 138 townhomes. Again, the proposed density overall is 1.68 units per acre, which it considers in the county that's a low-density development. Again, with the 30-foot PRD perimeter buffer requirements provided along the development edge, what Mark had mentioned, where we get the pinch point there with the ponds, the buffers, and then also the forest main from Davie County coming through there. And then we had that 100-foot PRD thoroughfare along the open space there on Heidels Road. Overall, 125 acres of passive open space is provided, and the 3.32 acres of the active open space that is spread throughout the site. We'll walk you through the site plan here a little bit more detail. One thing I also do want to point out is where we have tucked the proposed townhouses up in that northern section. Again, we're bounded by Tanglewood on the west and the north, and our own development on the south. We have Mallard Trail, which is private. That's kind of the back exit for Tanglewood. That's what's utilized during the Festival of Lights, so there's lots of traffic that comes through that whole entire section there. And so we thought that the use of the the townhomes backing up to that was an appropriate use to adjust that. And we do have the 30-foot buffer then that goes all the way around there. We have the 100-foot buffer then off of Isles Road, and then of course directly across the way is actually zoned GI, so that is an industrial future development for the county. So it's tucked in an area that we're not up against any single-family residence. The main entrance drive comes in and comes right into a large clubhouse and pool. So this site plan is highly amenitized in different uses and pocket parks throughout the site. Some that are more active than others, more kind of for sitting in gazebos. As you can see, we have a mail kiosk in our first one, so it's centralized right when you come in. And then next to the clubhouse, we have pickleball courts that are kind of planned to go throughout. So this is more kind of really going to be targeted to an active adult, 55 and older. It's not going to be restricted, but that's what it's going to be marketed to for more of the limited look at that. And that's how the products are kind of developed with the masters down, especially for the townhouses, and then you have bonus rooms up on the top. So then once we got the multifamily there to the north, we'll kind of progress then down to we'll call it the middle section. It's a mix of lot sizes, so 2 lot sizes there. Again, we're threading the needle in that aspect of trying to avoid the ponds and wetlands that have been identified on this site. We'll point out the way the site plan is done, we are not impacting and grading any wetlands or any streams throughout this 319 acres. We do have our secondary connection then to Fox Park. That's a public drive there. You will notice, again, this is very similar to the last case you just heard. We are bounded by different areas that we don't have limited access to where we can make our secondary access points. So we got our new proposed entrance there on Idles, and then our secondary connection to Fox Park. The Peggy Drive, it was looked at, that actually kind of stubs again into the site there. You can just see it in the middle. Again, there's severe topography, and then there's also some streams and concerns in that area, so we're not able to make a connection. And I believe that people that might be here from Peggy Drive area would not want a connection or any more traffic coming through their neighborhood as well. Most of our main drives, we try to terminate them into greens where they're passive space, so they just have something that you kind of focus on. So the darker green is where we have all those active open spaces that you can see here on the site plan. For instance, in the middle here, we've also got another area that's up against Tanglewood for another potential for a pickleball court. So we're trying to spread those type of amenities throughout. The main section here is, is discussed with regards to the YR and to the RS-15. Again, you can see that gray line that kind of subdivides that location. Strictly, if you follow the YR rules, I think we'd be limited to 69 total lots in that area. We are at 109 lots, we're 40 more. With these small lots, if we were looking at this isolated as a wire, but we worked with staff to kind of discuss, we really want to look at this as a comprehensive plan and how everything would lay out from that standpoint. So when you look at it in its totality of all the districts together and the density that we are providing, we fit within those requirements. So you can see just north of the larger pond, that's where our one stream crossing is. That will be bridged so that we don't have any impacts in the area. This site, again, is low density. And so we're following the county and the state rules in terms of stormwater management, with it being low density, vegetated means and conveyances. So we would try to break up any of the stormwater that runs off the lots and our infrastructure into each kind of draws. We'll kind of portion it out so that it conveys for more of natural conveyances at that point. There aren't any requirements then to provide stormwater management devices because we meet those low density requirements and we're avoiding any impacts in the streams and the wetlands. And this will just kind of give you an idea then of what our developed area is represented by about roughly 157 acres, and we'll call the undisturbed area is roughly 162 kind of overall. So our undisturbed is 51% of the site. Again, we're looking at protecting those sensitive areas from floodplains and also providing stream buffers. And the plan avoids any impacts to any floodplain, existing streams, and wetland features. We did have a neighborhood outreach. We met at the Clemens Civic Center. We sent out the invites to everybody that's identified here in red, so you can see the 500-foot buffer. We sent out a total of 77 letters. We received 10 phone calls, had also received emails, and we had approximately 30 neighbors attend that drop-in session. We kind of walked them through the site plan. A lot, of course, of the main concerns that you will see in this area is, the question about density and the impacts to this, and then, of course, traffic that gets generated on Idles Road. Ray McKemp will be able to answer those questions, so Chase will be able to answer those questions that you have in regards to any of the traffic concerns. NCDOT is in their jurisdiction for review, so we've worked with them on what their requirements were going to be. Winston-Salem, it's in their MPO, so they also provided some input into the requirements. But overall, we fell mostly back on the requirements of NCDOT, and Jeff might be able to answer the kind of the things that they had recommended as well. So the project provides, again, a variety of housing types through a comprehensive design community. There's the availability of the public utilities in the area that provide more opportunities for development and higher densities because of that. What we've got proposed right now, we're working with the city county utilities department exactly what to do with it. We've got a private lift station, so everything would be private at that point, and then that would be a force main worked out to tie into the Idles Road. But we're also working with them with the potential for this to become also a public lift station that would serve this site. So we're in those discussions, whether it's private or public, and those come with different requirements, obviously, from state requirements and what the county utilities requires. The plan is sensitive to the environmental factors and maintains approximately half the site as undisturbed. The crest is consistent with legacy when we look at it in total comprehensive package of what the plan is. There's going to be some discussion on whether it fits with the YR district or outside of that and how that happens. So really talking about the 40 lots that are in the YR. And again, staff recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Yes, Ms. Dunning.
Mr. Dickey, about that private lift station, could you show us where that is on the map?
So it's slightly cut off on my image here, and I don't know if I can get my cursor to, there it goes. So it is located right down in this area next to that pond.
Okay, so can you explain why you need that when the Idles lift station was the reason given for the ability to do this project?
Yep, so the Idles lift station is public, so that opens up that drainage basin to be able to get over to the main wastewater treatment facility. So what we have to do for this standpoint from a private system is everything follows gravity. And so right now, everything in this site kind of is we're draining the sewer to that one low point, and then we have to be able to, and then the grade difference between where the Idles Road lift station is and where this proposed lift station is would require then a force main to be able to get us up and over to Idles Road.
So if I understand correctly, you're saying that the Idles lift station gives you that capacity to pump the sewer long distance, but you still need the small private lift station. Because of the gravity and the topography, it would have to go uphill.
That's correct. And we're also looking at, with the city county utilities, Tanglewood, and their old lift station that they have there is about to wear out. So we are in conversation with them to be able to maybe tie into this lift station, and at that point, it would become a public lift station to be able to tie back into the Idols Road.
Thank you.
I have a question, well, two questions. Just looking at the layout, the housing lots, is there a difference, the beige versus the purple? I know it's different housing types.
Yeah, so the difference is, the bluer lots are the smaller ones, and the beige ones are the larger lots. So there's a 10-foot width difference in between those lots. So we're trying to provide different two lot sizes and then the townhouses.
Okay. And is Fox Park Drive, the location, is that aligned with the new access road across the street?
So with
County land?
Yeah, so Fox Park is basically kind of on that southern kind of boundary right here that comes out to Idols Road. Right now, it basically ends stubs into our property, and we would just continue that in and tie into our main drive there. The city of Winston-Salem, through the recommendations, were to widen that, as well as to look at providing sidewalk along Fox Park Drive as well.
Okay, so that's an existing road?
Yep, that exists.
okay.
So talking to some of the neighbors, they would prefer not to have a sidewalk in there because they don't really want to introduce new pedestrian traffic out into their street. From what we had from our discussions in the kind of the neighborhood meeting that we had with them, NCDOT at this point is indifferent to whether you provide a sidewalk. I mean, it's their streets. They really don't want to maintain a new sidewalk out in this area. But, working with the MPO, with the city of Winston-Salem in regards to that, I believe that was a condition that we would add and make improvements to Fox Park.
Okay.
Mr. Farabee, if I could, and again, I think I heard the question. I'm not. If you look on the main site plan that shows the entire project, where Fox Park is, it does show it aligning across from what could potentially be a street that on the county property, and whether that be an industrial park, whether that be something else, but yeah, I think it does align along Idols with that potential future street across the street.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I misunderstood. Yeah, that is correct. It does align that up with that, and I believe we were involved with that preliminary planning as well.
Right.
So that's
Yeah,
where this is actually shown on the site plan here. But that is, as far as I know, that right-of-way has not been dedicated at this point.
Are there any additional questions for Mr. Dickey?
I was comment. In the description you had it being phased in. Was that how will you do your? You'll need your pump station to begin with. You'll size it for the whole.
Yeah, basically at that point you put your pump station in where it's going to need to be required. You run the main trunk line that you need to for whatever first phase you build. So it's going to have you put that infrastructure in, and then you basically branch off and tie into that trunk line as each phase then develops into it.
Okay.
Good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Dickey. How much time?
Thank you.
3 minutes and 40 seconds.
All right. We have Greg Garrett.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Greg Garrett, and I'm a partner with the development company R.S. Parker Development, LLC. And we have been developing in the Triad for several decades. We have a home building company that many of you may be familiar with, R.S. Parker Homes. Some of our communities here in the county have been Waterford Glen, which is off of Lassiter Road. We're in the process of building a community in Louisville called Gladstone, and then Barrington Oaks and Clemens, and I could go on and on and on. Very familiar with the area, born and raised in the Triad, and I've been doing land acquisition and development my whole working career, now over 25 years, and I can tell you it's getting hard. It is getting hard to find property for development, and all the realtors, all the young folks looking for housing, all they tell me is that there's just no housing. And so it makes my job exciting, but also very hard and contentious, because the sites that are there are, infill sites or backing up to neighborhoods that were put in decades ago. And so I believe that's what we have here. I'm real excited about this project. This has been in the making since about July of last year. We've had countless conversations with your planning staff and have really worked hard on the plan that's before you this evening. I guess what I want to stress is that this project is geared towards the aging population. As we, survey the triad, we've yet to see retirement communities done as well as they can be done. And so this is a project that's modeled after Del Webb. As a matter of fact, we are in the process of having some very serious negotiations with them being the builder for this community. Del Webb is the premier retirement community, age-restricted developer in the nation. There are some in Raleigh, some in Charlotte, Arizona, Florida. Maybe some of you have heard of Del Webb, but I would encourage you to look it up. It's quite fabulous what they do, and that's why the community is highly amenitized. They're really selling lifestyle is what they're selling, and we're real excited to hopefully be a part of that. We're not able to call it age restricted because they've yet to give us a commitment, but it is most certainly going to be age targeted. We basically have 3 product types. You have the townhouses, which is up there in the northeast corner. Those are 2-story townhouses, but they're master down, and 2-car garages. I mean, this is not, a high-density multifamily type of, development in there. It is actually just designed to appeal to those active adults that are looking to have the master on the main for the future, right? And have room for the grandkids upstairs. They want their garages. They want a well-constructed house. And so that's what we're providing there. And then,
30 seconds.
Okay. And then 2 different size lots. And I'd like to point out they would all be ranch. There would be bonus room opportunities over the garage, but we're talking about all ranch homes, again, because we are going after the aging population. That is our target buyer. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Garrett, if you could state your address and zip code for the record.
Certainly. It's P.O. Box 5967, High Point, and that is 27262.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Garrett? All right, thank you. So the proponents are out of time, but there's one more speaker. Will you all grant a couple minutes for the speaker? Okay, without objection.
I believe he indicated that he doesn't need to speak. He perhaps is here to answer questions.
Is that correct? All right. All right, then we will go to the opponents, and the first person is Graham Wilson, and then I think this is Robert Grassi second.
Good evening. My name is Gray Wilson, 380 Norwood Street, Winston-Salem 27103. That's the address of the Nelson Mullins Law Firm. I'm here with my partner. My writing style is not very good, but I'm here with my partner.
Once you walked up, I recognized exactly who you were.
Okay. I'm here with my partner, Mark Stafford, and we represent a couple of neighborhoods in this area. They're both off Idols Road. Of course, Salem Glen is on the opposite side, but it was not mentioned that Idols Acres.
Excuse me, could you speak in the microphone we're having? Perfect.
It was not mentioned that Idols Acres is on the same side of Idles Road as this proposed development. So they're right up there abutting against it. There'll be 4 speakers here, and I'll be followed by a representative from Salem Glen and as well as someone from Idles Acres. But we also have a land planner here, Bob Grasso, from Asheville, and he'll speak to you next. So that's the layout here. There are 2 issues that I would bring to your attention. The first is compatibility. I couldn't agree more with Clemens that this area is not consistent. You need to put aside the zoning classifications here because our land planner will point out to you that most of the homes in this area are larger than RS-15. They're RS-20. And so this subdivision ought to conform, and it does not, at least in the reality. Here's the more important reality, though, and that's access. You have the template for that in the presentation you just heard before our own, with one exception. We're not asking you to change or upgrade anything because it's clearly unfixable. We're asking you to recognize the reality of access that already is in gridlock in this area. During peak hours, if you go to Middlebrook Drive where it joins or intersects with Highway 158, during those times, it's already a parking lot. You add another 1,000 trips a day, you're going to extend that all the way back down Idles Roads. It's something, if you put in 2 lanes and traffic signals, 2 extra lanes, traffic signals, none of which exist and none of which is going to happen, perhaps that might change it the right of way down there. Even with a railroad easement appears to be sufficient to handle that, but there are no plans for that. And so, you know, turning lanes are not going to eliminate stacking. What you're going to have out there is queuing that will exist up and down these 2 roads. I mean, there's not any alternative access that you investigated with the last project. That's it. You've got Middlebrook Drive and you've got Idles Road, and you've got all of these developments along there, Clemens West, Madison Place. You have people that live there. They're not going to be able to get into the road if this development goes forward. So we need to recognize that as an existing problem that we have there now. It's unfixable. Hopefully we can do something better besides approving this huge cluster development that's going to have traffic queuing all the way back from 158 down to Idles Road, perhaps to where it ends near the Yadkin River. So the previous petition, the opposition focused, you know, on the specter of what will happen. It's already there. It exists there right now. And Clemens knows that as well. So I'll let Mr. Grasso speak next. Thank you.
About 8.5 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Bob Grasso. I'm a landscape architect. I've been practicing for 40 years in the mountains, and I was tasked to review the master plan and to present my thoughts on it. There are 3 main observations that I made on this, and we're having a handout being passed out right now. If you look at the map on the second page, in the red is the floodway, orange is the floodplain area, the yellow is the transmission line, and the blue are the 2 of the existing ponds that are larger. If you look at all that acreage, that's undevelopable, and it's 125 acres, give or take. It's approximate, but it's pretty close to that. So when you look at what the density is, 1.68 units per acre, it's actually, if you were to look at just the developable land, it's 2.77 acres. And so that's quite a bit denser than what is being stated. Second observation is two entrances into the development for emergency vehicles. You have at least, or about 50% of the project is not served by a second entrance. So you have a real bottleneck right in that narrow zone there, so that if, let's say there's an emergency out in the western part of the property and there's a wreck in the bottleneck, there's no way for emergency access to get there. I would suggest that maybe property needs to be purchased so that they could have access to that western part of the property. The two entrances that are there primarily serve just the eastern part of the project. Third point I'd like to make is I looked at Clemens West, Quail Forest, Peggy Drive, Fox Park Drive, and the lots that are fronting Heidel Road. And the Clemens West, which is one of the gorilla or the elephant in the room as far as project size. It's zoned RS-15, and when I started clicking on all the lot sizes on what are they actually, and they all are, the majority of the lots meet the RS-20 requirements. So when we looked at Peggy Drive and Fox Park, that's zoned RS-30, but it's actually, the lot sizes comply with RS-20. So I was looking at that, and I thought, well, you know, even though it's they're asking for RS-15, what is really appropriate, what is consistent with what's been developed around it? And I've concluded that RS-20 would be more consistent with the surrounding developed property. Excuse me. We're not asking for this project to be denied. We're asking for the density to be consistent with the surrounding development that's taken place. Thank you.
About 5 minutes.
5 minutes, all right. Ryan Scott.
How you doing? My name is Ryan Scott. I'm a resident of Idles Acre at 7610 Peggy Drive, Clemens, North Carolina, 27012. So the first thing is here, I'm here to represent my neighborhood. There's a lot of concerns that we have facing around this site plan and this proposal. A few of the things that first bothered us was the overall density of the proposed neighborhood. Just like Mr. Grasso said, you look at the lots and they can say 1.7 dwelling units per acre, but if you narrow it down to the blue lots being 5,535 square feet and the larger tan lots being 7,600 square feet, that puts it around more like a 5.7 and to a 7.9 of actual buildable lots, which is a very high density compared to the rest of the landscape. You know, you look at my neighborhood, Idles Acres, which if you look on the map is right here, consists of Peggy Drive, Hawkhaven Drive, and Riverbrook Trail. My lot alone, my personal home, is just under an acre. Pretty much most of the lots there are an acre, and there's even some that reach up to 3 acres. If you turn off of Middlebrook and take a right heading west down Idles Road, Clemens West is adjacent to that corner. Most of the lots, the average lot size in Clemens West is an acre. You continue down Idles Road, most are an acre. And if you pass Peggy Drive, you actually have some lots down in here that are 8+ acres. So the zoning they're asking for, the RS-15, yes, I do realize that the zoning now says RS-15 in Clemens West, but as Bob Grasso said, it's more consistent with an RS-20, and just like us, we're RS-30. So I believe that we believe in Idles Acres, especially that the zoning for this proposed development should complement and should be consistent with the other surrounding neighborhoods that are there. Same thing if you head right up the road to Salem Glen. The average lot size is just over an acre. So the other issue we have, obviously, is traffic. 564 proposed units, that puts an influx of 1,000+ vehicles on the roadway. Idles Road, necessarily, you could look at it as not a big problem, but as Gray Wilson said, when you get into Middlebrook Drive, it becomes a real issue. especially when you hit the northbound side of it at 158. There's many times I take my kids to Clemens Elementary School that I may sit through 3 or 4 light changes just waiting on traffic to proceed through there, and that's everybody from the surrounding neighborhoods leaving and heading to work in the morning. Next issue you get, when we went to the community meeting on April 20th, I did meet with Mr. Dickey and Mr. Greg Garrett, and one of the things they mentioned to me was, yes, they were proposing this as a 55 and older active adult neighborhood, but one of the things that kind of hurt was that they told me that. They said, hey, look, this is a targeted neighborhood for 55 and up, and these people, and quote, these folks are elderly and they don't want to travel during peak hours of time. Well, I called the inaccuracy of that immediately because my 85-year-old grandfather, God rest his soul, he died in November. He lived in Clemens, and he was on these streets in Clemens 4 or 5 times a day without question. In my line of work, I see a lot of elderly drivers out on the roads in Clemens. It's not accurate information at all. Another big problem we had with this proposal is that what we noticed on the site plan was the purchased land adjacent to Idle's Acres. Right here was a lot that was owned by L.A. Topping and was recently purchased by Cecil Haas, as well as this property here. That gave us a belief that there might be future plans for access point. As Mr. Dickey has pointed out, that is not accurate due to the creek and the ponds here. So I do have emails from some people with Stemmel and also Mr. Allred that say that there's no plans for that going through. Just in case, I also circled a petition through my neighborhood, and every single neighbor in my neighborhood signed it, that we do not allow access into Riverwalk or any proposed development on that property for the future. We got an issue with, the next issue we have is with this.
30 seconds.
The next issue we have is this buffer zone. These two people here on 7680 and 7660 Riverbrook, it's a suggested 30-foot buffer zone. If you did that buffer zone, you would literally carve away the hillside to my neighbor's yard here, and that carving would be detrimental to the tree roots, 100-foot trees that have been there for decades. And if you do that, it's most certainly going to kill those trees. So we're proposing at Idle's Acres that we drop the request for RM5, that you, or you deny the request for RM5, excuse me, that you ask for a larger buffer zone on the backside of our neighborhood, maybe even extended to 100 feet. And obviously that we'd like you to really take an assessment of the traffic situation, which I know is not in your forte, as we've seen in the last case. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we are out of time. But
all right. Once again, we have 2 speakers left. Give another 5 minutes to the opponents. David, I don't want to butcher your last name, and then Charles Sherrill, I think it is.
Thank you, guys. It's Zavaleta, David Zavaleta at 1013 Glendale Drive, Clemens, North Carolina 27012. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I also happen to be the Salem Gun Residents Hall Association president. And, I'll be honest, it's my first time to anything like this. And in my career and in my lifetime experience, I think that sometimes when you have a fresh set of eyes that comes into something without knowing anything of anything, or in this case, fresh set of ears, because a lot of listening going on, couple of questions and a couple of things just kind of come to mind. Understand that the lift station is built there for future planning and growth, which nobody I can speak freely with for the residents. It's undeniable that obviously Clemens and North Carolina is going to continue to grow. What I'm failing to see, though, is, and I think we're failing to see it, and I think that there was a traffic impact report that was also brought forward. I mean, it was made public. We just fail to see some of the logic I see the logic in building a lift station, planning for future growth, but we fail to see some of the logic when it comes to, and as it was described already, the traffic that goes down Middlebrook into 158 intersection, then turning into Lewis Clemens Road. as a lot of people use that to go straight to, it's the easiest access to I-40. It is backed up quite a bit now, and Middlebrook is a single lane going in each way. And I think, to me, it would just make more sense that if and it's not the developer's fault at all that this is going on, but it would make more sense to me, and I think to all residents, that, yeah, I mean, future plan, future growth, great. We're all for it. As a matter of fact, it would probably help the membership at our country club. But having said that, it just fails to see the logic of the increased traffic on Middlebrook as it stands right now. If Middlebrook was expanded, it would probably, be a lot more easier to absorb this type of development and future developments. But at some point, that's going to have to happen. But it doesn't seem to be in the works for any time soon. Questions about, and I did see this one time, an ambulance trying to come down during peak hours. There's just no place for cars to go on Middlebrook as it is. I mean, zero room. I mean, you'd literally be driving off into the sidewalks or into ditches. So not understanding that at all either. The other thing so I guess what I'm trying to say is that's traffic impact report doesn't seem to be complete. It only takes into account Idles Road and just the turnoff between Idles and Middlebrook, but it does not seem to take into account, or maybe the proposal would be to expand that traffic impact report to include that intersection and the impact on Middlebrook and what that would, what another 1,000 or 2,000 trips a day would really mean to that area. So, thank you.
Thank you.
2 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Charles Sherrill, and I live at 115 Spilsbury Court in Clemens. That's in the Clemens West subdivision. I was the HOA president from 2020 to 2021. I would like to support this project because the fact of the matter is, for my fellow opponents, that the county is still planning an industrial park across the street from this. And that was going to generate several thousand truck trips a day under its original plan. So to my way of thinking, the more residential development we have on the Isles Road corridor, the better. Now, having said that, I think there are several unanswered questions. I think the gentleman from Asheville raised a lot of those. I do think that really, I would like to know whether or not this is going to be an age-restricted neighborhood or not, if it's going to be built, because I think if it's age-restricted, that it will have a much more favorable reception. I think the issue with the two entrances being very close together, I think, is a fairly serious issue. I think if you had a serious disaster in that area towards the middle of this property, we did have a tornado touchdown when I moved here about 10 years ago. Or gas line leak, you could cut off the back end of that residential neighborhood, which would be filled with at least a large number of elderly people. So I think that needs to be considered. Couple other points. This particular development sits right, obviously, on Tanglewood Park, which is the crown jewel of the County Park system.
30 seconds.
Not really seen any elevations or artist renditions of how that would impact view sheds from the park. So I think it's important to consider that as well. Thank you very much for your time this evening and your service to Forsyth County.
Thank you, Mr. Sherrill. Are there any questions from the board for anyone in the audience? If not, I'm going to declare at this point the public hearing closed. So any deliberation, or is anyone ready to make a motion?
I would like to make a comment, if that's
All right.
okay.
Sure.
I have a concern here about the adherence to legacy, especially with regard to building in GMA 5. That is my big concern. It seems like we have wonderful plans that we point to and we take a lot of pride in until we actually have to put them into place. I mean, and then we just abandon them. And I really feel that we're abandoning our principle regarding protecting the rural landscape in GMA 5, especially up near the Yadkin River. Now, the rest of the project, that's a separate question, but I'm really opposed to putting any of this development in GMA 5, especially the lift station, and especially if this becomes a public lift station, because that's going to attract more development in GMA 5 up to the Yadkin River. And I just see this as abandoning our commitment to that principle of legacy.
Thank you, Ms. Donegan. Anyone else?
Make a motion. I move that the planning board find that the request in F1617 consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Ms. McCray, second by Mr. Lamb. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Was that 4?
4.
Okay.
I then move that the planning board recommend approval of F1617.
Second.
It's been motion by Ms. McCray, second by Mr. Lamb. All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? 3.
And if I could, I apologize. Who voted against the comprehensive plan motion being consistent? Just so I make sure I have the correct folks.
Mr. Groves, Mr.
Okay.
Ryan, Ms. Donegan.
I'm sorry,
Smith.
I had one incorrect, and I wanted to make sure I did have it correct. Hopefully someone can understand my scribble. So just so everyone realizes, again, I think most folks do this, we'll go to the county commissioners at some point in the future for their deliberation and public hearing for an actual vote. This is a recommendation, and I'm not sure when that will be, but probably sometime in June would be my guess. Mr. Chair and the board, what we have left on the agenda today is the staff report. And I'll try to be quick given the hour that we're at. The first thing I'll do is I'll turn to Desmond, who will give you a June caseload preview, and I think it's actually fairly light, so.
Yes. Excuse me, we have 3 rezoning petitions, one of which was continued or has been continued multiple times. And then we have 3 items for planning board review, one of which has been continued that I mentioned earlier. So you should have fewer public hearings and a faster meeting.
Planning light?
Mr. Chairman, the next item is the May work session agenda preview. Kirk is not here. I do know that we will have a continued discussion on the comprehensive plan forward 2045 and kind of where we see that going. And then also we'll hand out the work program. We'll send the work program out ahead of time, and we'll have a discussion on that. I would like to turn and introduce Ed Harrison. I was joking with Tara earlier. Ed joins us. He took Beth's place, and I wanted to say that he's probably sent more emails to y'all this week than Beth did in her entire time here. So for those that don't know, Ed was a longtime employee of the city, a great employee. He left employment with the city and decided he wanted to come back, and we're very fortunate to have him in our department. For those that don't know, he is going to be a real asset. So welcome him if you get the opportunity. We will meet for work session in here in May, but that will be our last meeting in here. We're going to go back to the Bryce A. Stewart building and meet in the Arnold King room for the first time in over 2 years, beginning in June, and I believe we're going to do that with all of our boards and commissions. The one thing I do want to add as the final item I have on work program, or excuse me, under the staff report is the work program. I did meet with representatives representatives of the city and the county manager's office earlier this week to discuss the work program. One of the things we did talk about is the need to have discussions between the county and the city manager's office, perhaps the planning board chair and the utility commission chair, who is a former planning board member, Wesley Curtis, and then perhaps myself and the utilities director, Courtney Driver, as a preliminary discussion. Then what that may turn into is more of, that discussion may lead to wanting to have some type of a subcommittee or something. Again, I can't commit to that because we haven't met, but that is something that we do need to do to talk about the future of sewer and what that means on our land use. So again, I did want you to know that I thought that was a timely comment that was made, and we have already actually begun saying we've got to do that. So with that, I have no additional items.
First, I'd like to welcome Ed Harrison. I know Ed very well. We've grown up together, so it's good to see him again. So you can cut down some of the emails that we appreciate. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
All right, we'll have our motion to adjourn this evening.
Second. On the goes. I really want to do a 5-hour.